7 o'clock on Monday is when you can join me for some more Max chit-chat. Meanwhile, of course, thank you very much indeed for all your comments and your kind words, and most of them that I've been able to read out, some of them not so much. But I'm very pleased that you've all been hijacking, getting excited about the prospect of speculating on that Wuhan lab and agreeing that, we all knew what we knew. Anyway, thank you very much indeed for all your calls, your texts, your emails whilst I've been hosting the Drive Time show. I will be back with you, as I said, on Monday at 7 o'clock. Meanwhile, have a wonderful weekend. Russell Quirk's next.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened.
I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. The shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in, or far ball, slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs. The people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Good evening. Welcome. It's just gone 7 o'clock. I'm Russell Quirk in for Kevin O'Sullivan. This is the Political Asylum on Talk. And so buckle up for 3 hours of opinion, debate, banter, argument and entertainment on all of the main stories of the day. And first, that Reform versus Tory party membership story really isn't going away, especially as the Reform ticker is now marching towards 150,000 members, with the Conservative Party rather running scared, I think, and enough to start placing seemingly false claims in the media about the authenticity of the Reform numbers. Farage says he'll take action and wants an apology. I wonder if Kemi Badenoch is actually going to apologise. I suspect not. Or Kemi Blame-a-lot, as maybe we should be recharacterising her. She's certainly on the ropes, I think, here. I think she's made a significant error, a significant mistake, but we will talk about that as the show progresses. Tim Montgomery, by the way, the recent defector, the Conservative Home founder, says of Kemi, a new party leader that's lazy and is having no impact. Wow. But why, I want to know, are Tory politicians so apathetic about Reform's surge? Pride comes before a fall, I suppose. Tell me why you think the hapless Tories are not taking Reform seriously. And the big question, despite this row and the toing and froing, the rocks that are being thrown from Farage to Kemi Badenoch and Kemi Badenoch back to Farage, Do political memberships actually matter? Do they matter to you? Let me know. 0344 499 1000, or you can text 87222 with the word talk, and we will receive that directly in the studio, and we will read out your text and indeed voice notes. You can call the same number, 0344 499 1000, and leave a voice note on WhatsApp, and we will play that if you do so. Also coming up, Rachel Reeves' answer to messing up the economy in record time via a regressive budget that is shrinking the economy is now apparently to double down and hit us with more taxes in 2025. Politicians really are stupid, aren't they? This is what happens when you hire a call centre manager to run Britain's finances, I suppose. Can you tax your way to growth? I rather think not. 0344 499 1000. And also, the big topic of tonight, the UK prison crisis. David Gauke, remember him, the former Justice Secretary in 2019, a wet Tory, a left-leaning Tory that served a brief spell as that Secretary of State for Justice back then. He is definitely on the left of the party, and I guess that is why the Labour government have now tasked him with a review with regard to what to do about the prison population. Famously, of course, more prisoners than there are spaces, and we'll be putting some numbers to that a bit later on. His answer is apparently to put prisoners in cosier, open prisons. Well, as a proper Conservative, as I think I am, I don't think that the answer is to put prisoners in cosier cells with TVs, PlayStations and takeaways on a Friday night, frankly. Bearing in mind, David Gauke is the guy that, when he was Justice Secretary, decided that it would be a good idea not to put anybody in prison if their sentence was less than 6 months. So talk about being on the left of the party. Let's also talk about Christmas Day migrants. Another 450 crossed the Channel just on Christmas Day. The total now that we have seen this year, this is just the illegal small boat migrants, 35,491. That is up 21% on 2023. Smash the gangs. When does that start, I wonder? 0344 499 1000, if you can tell me when that starts, because it doesn't seem to have happened yet. And also the convicted terrorists suing 2 more innocent pubs that are called the Saracen's Head, one in Hereford, one in Hertfordshire, in addition to the original one in Amersham. And he says, the convicted terrorist, that he's going to donate the money to Gaza orphans. Yeah, of course he will. Do you believe him? What's he really up to? 0344 499 1000. And then the King's speech. It turns out Charles isn't quite as good as his mum at this kind of thing. I was totally uninspired, I have to be honest, on Christmas Day watching King Charles' speech. I thought it was political, and I thought it rather glossed over things, particularly the unrest in the summer. He didn't seem to be particularly in touch with that, did he? And he also talked about how well multiculturalism's going. You might disagree with that. Let me know if you do. 0344 499 1000. Was his speech good enough? I don't think so. Lots of guests coming up over the next 3 hours, but not least Tory party apologist and regular Friday night fixture on the political asylum, Peter Barnes.
Hello, Russell.
Hello. Do you like that introduction?
Tory party apologist.
Well, I suspect you're going to be over the next couple of hours.
Realist, you know.
Realist.
Yeah, the person that looks at the data, that looks at facts, that doesn't just go off what social media says. You know, when you were running around in 2016 going, social media is not the country, you know, Twitter is not a constituency. The very same people now are doing the exact same thing, and you're all Reform supporters. It is entertaining beyond belief.
It is very entertaining.
I have to admit, this story has been fantastic to watch unfold.
But it was your leader, Kemi Badenoch, that started this little spat 24 hours ago.
I will agree with you on this. This is the one bit of the story where I think we're going to agree, because I separate it out. I think there's the Kemi bit and there's the actual what it means for reform. If we look at the Kemi bit, this was a catastrophic mistake. Whoever thought of it should be booted out of CCHQ, booted out of Number 10, booted out of the country. If we could deport them, we should deport them for sheer stupidity.
You were already saying to me before we came in as an excuse for Kemi that, she wouldn't even know anything about this tweet.
There's a very strong chance that she wouldn't.
Do we really buy that?
Well, this is the thing. When you actually run comms for big political figures, they rarely run their own comms, because technically,
I think that might have just changed at central office in the last 12 hours or so.
Yeah, because there's a couple of times I think previous politicians have been caught out by staffers running their comms, and they've all made a mess. So whether Kemi runs her own, I actually don't know. Now, she might do, she might not, but I have to admit there is no way she should have picked this fight. Absolutely, it was stupidity. There should have been an off-the-cuff remark saying, "Good for Nigel, but I've got other things to worry about." She should have downplayed it.
She would have been better off just saying nothing.
No. Don't say nothing, because then that looks like you're running away from it. What you do is you just downplay it, and you make it look like Nigel is doing what I call pick-me energy. Say like, "Look at me, look at me, look at me," which is what this entire thing has been for reform. In reality, this means nothing. But absolute nothing.
But I think there's well, no, I think it means a lot. I completely disagree. I think this means a lot in terms of you've got the oldest party on the planet, the Conservative Party, that are about, and Kemi, of course, is now questioning, or rather Farage is now questioning whether Kemi's numbers herself are correct or not. But you've got the oldest party in the world that's sitting there at about 130 to 135,000 members. Then you've got the newest party in Britain, which is only 3 or 4 years old, that is signing up members. And bearing in mind there's a cost to sign up members. So that you don't just sign up.
It's £10 if you're under 25, and I think it's 25 quid if you're
But the reason I make that point is that this is not, and I've seen this on social media, where people are trying to explain away this surge in reform membership by saying, well, they'll all be Russian bots, won't they? They'll all be foreign sign-ups. Well, not when you have to pay 10 quid, 25 quid, or not when you actually have to not just pay, but you actually have to put in a valid form of payment in which to do so. So the reason I think that this is important is because it shows absolutely and clearly and definitely the surge in grassroots support for reform. There was an MP yesterday, a Conservative MP, said, yes, but they've only got 5 MPs, haven't they? And I thought that was a really pathetic thing to say. And I think if that characterises the Conservative Party on the basis that they want to continue to feign apathy about reform and pretend that this doesn't matter and that reform are a joke party and so on, then the Conservatives have learned nothing since the election defeat of July the 4th.
Yeah, so I'd agree with you. It is not... We shouldn't say that they've only got 5, because we're all about the next election.
The Conservatives might have 5 in 4 years' time.
Well, see, again, this is where you lose me. This is where you get into hyperbole. And
slight tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah, but I mean, like, if we actually look at the data, so if we look at the council election results that have been going on from July the 4th right up to now, there's been about 154 of them. The Conservatives have gained the most. Reform have only gained 7 council seats.
But they're a brand new party.
They're 6 years old.
Yes.
6 years old. And yet people running around saying Nigel Farage is going to be the Prime Minister by this time next year. Which one do you want to play? You can't. You're playing both cards here. You say it's a brand new party, but they could be the next government. Which one is it?
There is some merit to saying that in terms of his popularity. And obviously, look, they say a week's a long time in politics. I mean, that's definitely true. Yeah. I think that's now condensed down to, you could say, a day. It's an equally long time in politics in terms of news cycle. But obviously, look, who on earth knows what balls, I guess, might be fumbled, so to speak, by Nigel Farage and the Reform Party over the next 4 or 5 years. That is definitely a possibility. However, let's try and agree on something here, right? Let's assume that there is equal popularity now between the Conservatives and Reform.
There's not.
So the blue-on-blue thing, notwithstanding what's happening over the last 24 hours, the right, let's call it the right, the centre-right, is seeing huge popularity, and it's partly because obviously Labour has done such a terrible job of the first 6 months of government, but also because those disaffected Conservatives that don't want to be Conservatives anymore, either in terms of voters or members or indeed donors, very, very importantly, are now turning to Reform because they have somewhere else to turn to. So what you end up with is a block of right-wing votes, centre-right votes, that are undoubtedly going to be very, very powerful when it comes to the next general election and indeed council seats next May, if Keir Starmer allows those to go ahead and decides not to be such a despot, frankly, and so on and so on. What is going to happen, mark my words, is that with that equal popularity, a year or two out from the general election, Reform and the Conservatives are going to have to do a deal.
Agreed.
And they will do a deal. Now, what I mean by that is not a merge.
No.
We don't end up with the Reform Conservatives as one party. It'll be a seat-by-seat discussion and analysis whereby you will end up as a member of the electorate seeing that in your constituency you will either be able to vote for a Reform candidate or a Conservative candidate. If that happens, the vote doesn't get split and the Reform Conservative Party coalition wins the next election. The very interesting thing will be, how do they hold it together as an organised entity, almost as a coalition, in terms of who then does what? So do you agree that that's bound to happen?
I agree that a kind of a coalition between Reform and Conservatives, not a merger, is the likelihood. I don't agree that they're on par with popularity by any stretch of the imagination.
But the polls are even saying it, Pete.
If there was a general election today, I've literally looked it up before we came in, the Labour Party would be 41 short of a majority, the Conservatives would sit on 205 seats, Reform 38.
Because of the first past the post
First
dynamic.
past the post. So this is the thing. This is where realpolitik kicks in. This is where the electoral math actually matters. So they could get 10 million votes, but they're only getting small amounts of seats. And so this is why I keep saying that, yes, you could have all this popularity, all the membership you like, but at the end of the day, it's these numbers that matter, not those.
But they'd still be kingmakers.
And this is the point, is it, whilst we blame first past the post, the Reform are still having a major problem of translating lots of media attention into electoral gains and successes. They aren't really making those important strides. Now, they're holding steady in the polls, roughly third, or just behind the Conservatives.
But when you say
it's still within the margins of error.
But all three main parties are within 1 or 2% of each other. They're all sitting there around about 22 to 23% in polling popularity. Now, of course, we can all argue around the accuracy of the polls, particularly actually off the back of the Trump election and how badly many people, Rory Stewart particularly, got that wrong based on those polls. So we all know that the polls are inaccurate.
The interesting thing with those polls is that Labour and the Conservatives have gone, the Labour Party have gone down, the Tories have gone up, Reform have stayed stable. That's all stagnant, might be a better word for it. So that's why they might all be within a point of each other, but it's how did they get to within a point that's the really important matter here. And this is why what the right, and I say the right collectively, has to be very careful of, is that no matter who comes to the government next time, they don't end up like Keir Starmer, where you're running a we're not that guy. So Keir Starmer's fallen into this trap of thinking he was really popular. He wasn't. And I think that the Conservatives, who I think will win the next general election off the numbers that we're seeing now, I do think, or at least this kind of Reform.
We're going to take a break now because we need to do such things, and then we're going to come back and talk about this a bit more, but also particularly from the context of why is Kemi so bad? You're going to disagree with that. And why do the Conservative Party, honestly, why are they paying lip service to the surge of reform? Now, you will say they're not that powerful, but many people that are listening to this, many people that will call in, that will text in, no doubt, will say that in terms of grassroots feeling, reform are hugely supported by the grassroots in Britain. Let's see. When we come back, and please join in, 0344 499 1000, depending on which side of the Reform or Conservative fence you sit, or text 87222. We're going to continue this after the break. I'm Russell Quirk, and this is Talk.
happened to that pledge to be the fastest growing nation in the G7? Well, that's one of many promises, pledges, even just targets that seem to have been dropped, particularly after that catastrophic budget from Rachel Reeves. And it looks as though we might be heading for Rachel's recession. They all talked about Rishi's recession a year ago. Well, if you use that kind of language, it's going to come back and haunt you. So Rachel's recession, I'm afraid it will have to be labelled that.
Demonstrating its do what I say, not as I do attitude. I mean, Just Stop Oil, they are hypocrites and they are a blight on society, aren't they?
I mean, look, if I was doing Just Stop Oil's PR, which is not a job I would ever do, but if I was, I would say, do you think that maybe you should source those T-shirts from such absolutely watertight, ethical places that no one could ever dream of putting you on the front page of the Express to complain about this?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to the Political Asylum. I'm here with Peter Barnes, accompanying me until 10 o'clock. And yes, we're on the growing story of the Reform membership, which of course has been much publicised by them and all of the media really over the last few days. Reform really going for it in terms of trying to get past and have now got past what they perceive to be the Conservative Party membership number of about 131,000. Of course, they granted some concessions, which I'm sure Peter Barnes will remind us of in a second, in terms of so-called discounted membership for youngsters. And I suspect there'll be a bit more of that as time goes on. You know, maybe the elderly, maybe pensioners. I mean, they're the ones that really could do with a discount, particularly as they have less money now thanks to the Labour government taking away their winter fuel allowance. So, look, does it matter to you, watching and listening to this, whose membership is what? I mean, I would contend that it does in terms of it being a barometer of party popularity. Yes, it's not reflected, as Peter Barnes rightly points out, in terms of a likely outcome if there were a general election tomorrow because of the first past the post system. But it is quite a phenomenal achievement by Nigel Farage and his team, and indeed the other 4 MPs, councillors and so on that have either been elected to Reform in recent weeks and months or indeed have defected. And I do think we're going to see much, much more of that in the coming months. More defections from councillors. Peter Barnes shaking his head, but it's inevitable, it's going to happen. And I'll tell you why it's going to happen, Pete, is not just because they now have this momentum, but also I think because I don't think Kemi Badenoch has shone particularly brightly.
I'll give you that.
Now, when I talk to people about this on this station, many commentators say, yes, but she's new, she wants to get her feet under the table and she's biding her time. I think that's the wrong strategy and the wrong tactic. I think she should have come out of the blocks very quickly on a number of things, particularly to answer questions that we all have and the party have of her around, for instance, the ECHR, whether she would leave that, whether she would change the UK Human Rights Act so that it detached itself from the ECHR, because we all know that there's really, that's one of the catalysts, or it's certainly a piece of red meat, shall we say, when it comes to the electorate, that needs to be seen to be done so that we can, you know, rid ourselves of people that are here incorrectly that seek to do us harm. Now, she's not done that. She doesn't seem to have come out with anything in the way of a manifesto, a policy agenda, or even a vision. So if you're a Conservative Party member, as you are, I mean, you're not sitting there feeling a little disappointed that you don't actually know what Kemi Badenoch stands for.
No, because I actually kind of understand the Kemi's strategy here, because if you jump in with 2 feet 4 years before the next general election, you've just tied your hands. You've tied your hands because what you're now going to have to do is spend the next 4 years defending policies that could be 4 years old.
But do you think, therefore, so what you're saying by extension is that we won't hear anything in terms of vision or policy from Badenoch for the next 3 years?
I think you won't hear anything of major substance from an opposition party. You never did from any other opposition. You didn't from Keir Starmer, realistically. And if you did, it was a kind of, this is what we're going to talk about this week. It was what they call policy week focus. So this week they try and attack on the issue of crime, or they'd attack on the issue of immigration or something like that, and they'd vaguely say what they would do as an alternative. What they won't do, and no opposition party has ever really done this, is release a full manifesto of what they would do 5-6 months after a general election. But no political party has done that, so I don't understand why we're now demanding the Conservatives do it.
Because not only do the party need to know what the new leader stands for, particularly over that one question, the ECHR.
The Conservatives have just had a huge election.
But also, you're going to have multiple elections now for such things as district councillors, town councillors, county councillors, ultimately things like police, fire and crime commissioners. I mean, are we really expecting the public to go into those elections really not knowing what the national the party stands for?
I think you will get, like all political parties will do, probably...
Sounds like a recipe for disaster.
No, I think all political parties will do this in the next couple of weeks. They'll have a kind of local elections mini manifesto where they'll focus on things like school funding, and they'll focus on more local based issues rather than the big national ones, such as immigration, because councils really have no control over immigration levels.
No, they don't.
So people will vote based on that.
People on a local basis always vote with an eye on national politics.
Of course they do. But in terms of the releasing policies from political parties, all of them will focus on local issues rather than the big national ones, which is what most people are demanding Kemi bring out a policy agenda on, when realistically she's no need to right now. We are nowhere near a general election, despite what many people think.
I definitely disagree on the basis that, and don't forget the vacuum that has been left, by a leadership election that took months and months, and also the acceptance, I think, particularly from people of a proper Conservative mind within the party, that the previous 2 years of a Conservative government under Rishi Sunak were not very Conservative at all. I think the membership of the Conservative Party and potential voters are gagging, frankly, to hear what Kemi Badenoch believes. I mean, is she a proper Conservative? Is she just a continuation candidate? The other charge, of course, is that Labour and the Conservatives are also what are now being called, I mean, this is terrible for both of them, the uni party. So basically there's no difference at all between whether you vote for Kemi Badenoch or Rishi Sunak or, a Tony Blair or a Keir Starmer. They're all the same. They're all populist.
Again, not a
They all lie. Yeah, I know.
Not a new argument.
Well,
this is the thing. People keep running around thinking it's a new thing.
If it's not a new argument...
All it is Nigel Farage is saying it, and all the Faragists, as I've taken to calling them online. It's not a new argument,
but what does the main parties that are seeking votes over the next few years, locally and nationally, what do they do about that?
Well, the thing is, you keep saying that looking at the numbers, the actual data, the Conservatives are still winning seats despite having none of what you're saying at the local level, and they're still ahead of Reform and ahead of the Lib Dems and all the rest of them, and they're polling right within a hair's breadth of the Labour Party despite having none of what you've just argued. What I will say, though, is what the Conservatives are really going after is the stay-at-home Tory, not the defected Reformer. They're not going after that vote. That vote is lost. The Conservatives are smart in this one.
We're getting loads and loads of texts on this. I think we've triggered a few people here. Peter Barnes. Alison says, earlier on Talk it was said that the Conservative Party membership numbers include those that are members of a Conservative club. I know for a fact that not all members vote for the party. So in other words, not all members of Conservative clubs are Conservative affiliated as such. Both Labour and Conservatives will throw as much dirt as they can at Reform because they are scared of the party and its success, says Alison. There's a couple more, hang on. Stuart says, Kemi has missed so many open goals against Starmer. I think particularly Stuart means at PMQs, where, again, I think she's been lacklustre. I can only conclude that Kemi does not have the mental agility required to be leader of the opposition.
Oh, I always love that. The person I disagree with is stupid. I think that is an idiotic argument. That is essentially what...
No, he's not saying stupid. No, he's not saying stupid. He's saying mental agility.
There is an old line in politics.
As in, sharp enough, smart enough to stand on their feet.
Of all people, Kemi is smart. But the thing is, she doesn't need to respond, because when your enemy is destroying itself, don't intervene. She doesn't need to get involved when the Labour Party are blowing themselves up.
There's more. Nigel Brown. Nigel Brown, that might be my old boss, actually. If it is, hello, Mr. Brown. The face of British politics is about to change. Yes, it's in its infancy, but it needs many people to dig their heads out of the sand. It is talking about a bit more than just petty issues. It's really quite exciting, this political revolution.
Oh, political revolutions. Does anybody remember back in 2015, 16 and 17 when Jeremy Corbyn was leading a political revolution? It was the fastest political growing movement. He was leading the largest political party in Europe. Everyone was obsessing over Labour's numbers. How did it work out for them?
But
Not very well.
Didn't they discount their membership to £1?
I think it was £2. But again, it still shows the fact that there is no parallel you can really draw between membership numbers and votes, and also whether you can keep that momentum going. Because I completely agree with what the lady was saying earlier about membership and the Tory numbers and how it works. Alison, sorry. I completely agree with that. But also, if you're telling me that every single member of Reform is going to actively go and vote, I don't think you're quite right there.
I think they are animated and triggered enough by the Uni Party to want to be. You're saying in 4 years' time, maybe
4 years' time, it could all change.
But if we have an apathetic Kemi and an apathetic Conservative
you also
Party
have a very
and a disastrous Labour Party,
you have a very volatile
you have even more people wanting to vote Reform. Hang on, there's more. Claire says, evening Russell, evening Peter. Kemi needs to nail her colours to the mast, but I believe she's afraid to do this as the Conservatives have different factions in its ranks. This is a good point, actually. Either liberal or left-leaning, and she doesn't want to rock the boat and cause a split already. Nigel should not have an alliance with the Tories, as this will cause trouble with these troublesome factions. I mean, Claire makes a point, doesn't she? The Conservative Party is renowned for being at war with itself.
Oh, yeah, because it's a broad church. It's the same party that had Harold Macmillan, has Jacob Rees-Mogg, that had Theresa May, that has Ed Heath. The broad church is not the downfall of the Conservatives. It is why it is the most successful political party in history. People really get this argument really wrong.
These texts are absolutely pouring in. Also a few calls now, so do join in. 0344 499 1000. If you're interested in joining this debate, call in, speak to me, speak to Peter on 0344 499 1000. Yes, specifically on this subject for now, and I'm sure we'll revisit it as we go through the next 2.5 hours or so. Does it matter? Does the Reform surge? By the way, they're on 144,239 members now. So that's about, we think, certainly Reform think, about 13,000 more members than the Conservatives. The Conservatives, interestingly, Pete, don't normally publish their membership numbers.
No, they don't. No.
But they did do, I think, just after Kemi was elected.
Yeah, they did. I think it was to do with the fact that many people thought there was only about 4 members of the Tories left. So they kind of had to do it to show that there were still active members of the party. I think they were kind of bullied into it. It has always been a long-standing rule the Conservatives don't announce memberships because in reality, like we said, the number doesn't really matter. What I think matters in terms of for Reform is it shows that that ground game has a potential for being developed. The reason that the Reform are really struggling and will probably struggle at the locals and at the general elections and everything moving forward is they don't have the infrastructure that the main parties have. They don't have the personnel. They don't have the structures.
They don't have the people. They don't have the people on the ground.
Yeah.
But look, we'll talk when we come back after this break about the effect that the likes of Nick Candy and Elon Musk might have on that. Maybe they'll just employ people to be on the ground. Who knows? Right, we're going to come back after this. More exciting stuff after the break. I'm Russell Quirk. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back. We are knees deep in a debate which is a kind of blue on blue. In one blue corner, Kemi Badenoch and the Conservatives. In the other blue corner, Nigel Farage and Reform, and they're at each other's throats. I think it's all rather entertaining. Yes, as Peter Barnes has pointed out, maybe this is just something that entertains those of us that are kind of in the political bubble, so to speak, whether it be as kind of commentators, people in the media, and so on. But I do think it's important, and I do feel, for a whole lot of reasons, that what we are starting to see is and will be nothing short of a political revolution over the next 4 or 5 years. And I think I said on the last show I did, which was on Christmas Eve, it shouldn't really matter to most of you what that outcome is, insofar as the political revolution itself is important. A scorched earth policy is what I think this country needs in terms of taking down British politics and rebuilding it, because politics, whether it be first past the post or whether it be politicians, whether it be the selection process for the Labour Party and the Conservative Party, the type of people that politics attracts, people particularly over the last decade that have no life experience, are completely selfish, are in it for their career rather than their constituents and for Britain, that has to change. And I think that Reform might not be the definitive answer to that as the party, and you can argue, as Peter and I are, that that may or may not be the case. But what we need is a revolution. We need to, and you remember this term from the 2016 Trump election, we need to drain the swamp, and we really must do that. And I think what's happening here in terms of Reform's surge, money coming into Reform potentially, of course, we have seen it well documented that Nick Candy now is formally and officially the treasurer of Reform, so he will no doubt donate to the party and also will bring in lots and lots of his millionaire and billionaire mates to do exactly the same thing. He has already been on a plane with Nigel Farage to Mar-a-Lago to see Elon Musk and Trump, and presumably that was either about money coming from Musk to the Reform Party in the UK, or certainly some education and guidance when it comes to Elon Musk, explaining to Nick Candy how the whole commercial side of a political party and donations works. So fascinating time. I think we need it because, frankly, we cannot carry on as we have for the last 20 or 30 years with professional politicos running the country and doing what they want because it's right for them, rather than the population of 68 million people that, frankly, and I'm sure you agree with my sentiments, we are sick of you all. Sick of you. Sick of you. Let's go to a call. Heather in Govan, how are you?
Amen to that, sir. Russell, you're right with that 100%, because back in the beginning of the 19th century, the Liberal Party won the general election back then. But while we had Conservative and Labour parties still in existence back then, the Liberal Party did win in the beginning of the 19th century. But this is a turning course that we are all facing right now with the Reform Party. This is proven time and time again. History has proven that changes in democracy is merging to happen right now with Reform. The simple reason why Reform is surging forwards with more members than the Conservative Party, and soon more Labour members will move forward to the Reform Party, because they're sick and tired of the Labour government, they're sick and tired of the Conservatives. Both parties are facing a biggest change in history, in politics. This is the change of history that's proven time and time again. Reform can win the general election in 2029. Its history has proven time and time again it can happen, and it will happen as long as people are paying their membership to Reform Party. And it's proven this
And Heather, you think that we need a reset?
It's a change of democracy is happening right now.
Well, what do you mean a change of democracy? I mean, are you agreeing with me that the uni party, if we want to call it that, Conservatives and Labour and there's another player, I think, a yellow...
Yeah, I think the logo is a bird or something. I don't really pay attention.
Yeah, I think the party for Alton Towers and falling off of Wakefield...
Thorpe Park.
Those as well. But all of that needs to be almost destroyed from a creative destruction perspective to sweep clean. And so you agree with me? I'm not sure democracy needs to change. I mean, there's an argument around the voting system in terms of first past the post.
It's changing. It's the history of democracy is changing because democracy it's natural. It's a nature course of democracy.
Do you think we need a voting system change to proportional representation?
Exactly. We need to have a better understanding, some sensible politics, some smart solution, and we need some smart people in politics.
But Heather, can I just... I hear you, and we do, and I think there are some smart people in politics. I mean, there's, almost all of them were educated at Oxford and Cambridge, and I suggest that that's part of the problem. You can have very, very smart people...
They're not really that smart when they're not doing their job properly.
Well, but there's different...
Making mistakes.
But without getting into kind of philosophy and psychology, there are different types of intelligence. I'm not sure that we want to be ruled by people that are experts at the classics or that got a first in PPE. I want to be ruled by people. When I say ruled, I want to be led by people that I can respect, that have experience when it comes to the commercial sector.
You mean experience of running a business or something like that.
Community organisations, working, a middle level in the NHS, being someone who's been a fireman for 30 years. Ordinary, proper people, Heather.
We've been going round and round in circles with Labour and Conservatives throughout history, have we? We're going round and round circles and we're getting nowhere.
Yeah. But do you agree that it's going to change?
This is why people are surging forward to the Reform Party.
Yeah, because they're sick of the status quo.
It's not just sick of the status quo. They got fed up of the lies and the betrayal and the deception of both parties.
Heather, let me ask you a question, and just for balance. Do we think anyone in Reform has ever lied or will lie to get what they want electorally? Peter Barnes is chuckling.
Well,
do you think they're different?
We haven't given Reform any inkling or any chance to get to that point where they're actually running the country. We need to let them run their course, and when they win the general election in 2029, it's proven time and time again with history, it will happen. Yep. As long as membership of Reform keeps growing at a catastrophic rate as it is right now, this is the hunger that we're all desperate for. Yeah. And this is the beacon of Reform. It's like a beacon of light, a beacon of hope.
A beacon of light. Wow. I suspect, Heather from Govan, thank you very much indeed. A beacon of light. I suspect that might actually end up on the Reform Party website.
Yeah, it probably will.
In big kind of,
I
quote
put
marks.
It on it.
Heather from Govan in Scotland says a beacon of light. Right, we're going to take more calls after the break. The show seems to be going at quite a pace, doesn't it? We're enjoying ourselves, putting the world to rights and telling it how it is. The home of common sense, the home of free speech, as ever. This is Talk.
happened to that pledge to be the fastest growing nation in the G7? Well, that's one of many promises, pledges, even just targets that seem to have been dropped, particularly after that catastrophic budget from Rachel Reeves. And it looks as though we might be heading for Rachel's recession. They all talked about Rishi's recession a year ago. Well, if you use that kind of language, it's going to come back and haunt you. So Rachel's recession, I'm afraid it will have to be labelled that.
Demonstrating its do what I say, not as I do attitude. I mean, just to boil, they are hypocrites and they are a blight on society, aren't they?
I mean, look, if I was doing Just Stop Oil's PR, which is not a job I would ever do, but if I was, I would say, do you think that maybe you should source those T-shirts from such absolutely watertight, ethical places that no one could ever dream of putting you on the front page of the Express to complain about this? That's
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is
Welcome back. Russell Quirk in for Kevin O'Sullivan. This is the Political Asylum on Talk. Taking up to 8 o'clock, we're going to carry on with this Reform versus Conservatives membership story and the fact, of course, that Kemi Badenoch decided to lay down the gauntlet yesterday and to suggest that Reform UK's numbers were made up. And I'll just give you a quick update on what those Reform membership numbers are. 144,345, so about 13,000 past what Reform think the Conservative Party membership is. Nigel Farage, of course, has responded and said that it's insulting to say such a thing and that effectively he believes that he's been called deceitful and a fraud completely without warrant or merit. He's asked for an apology and has said otherwise there will be, inverted commas, action, whatever that means. Thank you very much, by the way, for all your texts. So we're going to go to a call in a second, but just let me read some of these out, because otherwise we're going to genuinely lose track of the text that we've had in. We're getting, I mean, lots and lots and lots and lots of them. Michael in Norfolk says, politicians need to experience the private sector to really understand the economics of the real world. I totally agree with that, and I think Rachel Reeves is a very good example of the opposite being true. We also have Greg here who says, go Heather. Ignore her at your peril. That's in reference to the call that we just took, where Heather was rather passionate, I think, about wanting democracy to be better. Claire says, oh, maybe this is a typo. We need Conservatives like Peter, says Claire. OK, Claire, fair enough. Let's go with this. If they do believe in our true Conservative values to thus think about the country and not stand up for a party like they do their football team, let's not be tribal. Let's be true to our beliefs and break the chain. And then we have Stuart in Wigan that says the public are sick to the back teeth of Tory shills like Peter Barnes. Oh dear, sorry, it was lasting so well, going so well.
Which Stuart is that? Because I'm from Wigan.
Stuart, S-T-E-W-A-R-T from Wigan. Don't have a surname. Not that I would think I would read it out anyway. But he says Peter Barnes is gaslighting us and claiming that we should back the Conservatives after years of
I'm not claiming to back anybody. I'm pointing out data.
Reform are the future of the right, he says. And unlike the Tories, they will also
remember when they said the same thing about
many Labour supporters, particularly in red wall areas like my town of Wigan. So, Peter, please stop embarrassing yourself on Twitter and the airwaves with your Tory shilling.
Do you know what? I'll say the same thing of my hometown from Wigan, where there's lots of Labour people who are never ever going to back the likes of Nigel Farage. And this is where Reform have a huge problem, and it is the Farage problem.
Well, we'll come to that. Yeah, we'll come to that. Hang on, bear with me, because it's funny you should say that. One more text. Politics has failed us, says Mark in Beccles, because those in charge have forgotten that they work for us plebs. Instead, they think they rule us. Well, that's politics and politicians have failed us. Right, let's speak to Mark in Lincolnshire, who, funnily enough, based on what Peter's just said, might want to make a similar point. Mark, thanks for calling Talk. How you doing?
Yeah, not bad, Russell. Yourself?
Yeah, good, thank you. Good. What did you want to say about Reform?
Yeah, I hope you guys all had a good Christmas, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. And you, I hope.
Lovely job. Nice and quiet for me, but hey, there you go. What I wanted to say was, yeah, my dad's bigger than your dad. Yeah. So, you know, it's pathetic. I mean, to be honest with you, yes, it's wonderful for them because they seem to get off on this kind of garbage. But for the electorate, it's just insulting, if I'm honest. because we're so sick and tired of this. And Farage getting himself involved in this only proves further to somebody like myself, who voted Reform last time. I will vote Reform again because they're my only real option at this point. There's others I would like to vote for, but they literally don't have a chance of anything. You know, but he's only proving the point that I'm always making to people on, you know, things like Twitter and what have you, that he's basically the Tory wannabe. He's really annoyed that the way they've treated him, the way they've kind of castigated him and cast him aside and don't want anything to do with him and all the rest of it.
Do you think he's just bitter because the Tory party don't want him as a member anymore?
Basically, yeah. I think ultimately he would prefer to be leading the Tory party. I think Reform were far more authentic under Tice. I also think as well, you know, his recent comments about immigration anyway. He's not on the same level as most Reform voters.
But Mark, can I just ask though, when it comes to his response to Kemi Badenoch yesterday, obviously she made an allegation that the numbers were fraudulent, that they were made up. That's quite a heavy allegation for a politician, particularly the leader of another party, to make. We can't blame Nigel Farage for resisting that allegation and rebutting it, and then, as he's done today, going to various organisations like the Telegraph and asking them to audit the systems, the website, the membership counter, to verify and validate that it is indeed correct. I mean, we can't blame Farage for speaking out, can we?
Well, it's a difficult one, isn't it, really?
But what would you do if someone made an allegation about you in your corner shop or you know, in your place of work? You wouldn't just say nothing if you knew adamantly that what they'd said wasn't true.
Well, if I knew adamantly that what they're saying isn't true, I would literally just turn around to them and say, well, prove it then.
Mm. Well, she can't, can she? And he's rather proved the opposite. Pete Barnes wants to come in.
Yeah, can I just say, Mark, I completely agree with you, spot on here. I think this, if you want to get into a members measuring contest with Nigel Farage on a Friday night, you go right ahead, but I would rather not. I think it looks pathetic. Of politicians saying, like you said, my dad's bigger than your dad. And actually, the only dad that you should care about is the electorate. And I think the ones that are paying attention to this, sadly, I do think it is those of us who are a little bit more politically engaged. But the vast majority of people either don't care or look at this as bickering politicians that just want to basically, they want them to go away. I do think, and I keep going back to this point, that Nigel is a great benefit to Reform, but he's also their biggest problem.
Why?
Because every single vote is a vote for Nigel or against Nigel. It's not for Reform. Reform is still the Nigel Farage show. The fact that they've yet to have this whole democratisation thing that was promised back in July, we're now in December, that's not happened. It's gone very quiet. You know,
what, in terms of the structure of the Reform party?
Structure. And I also look at how Nigel behaved when Ben Habib was let go of his position, and, you know, it's the icing on the cake comment. I thought that was childish and unnecessary. I do agree with Mark as well that I think Reform were more authentic under Richard Tice. I am not a big Tice fan. I
love Richard, but
I think
not
he's
as big. But
he's not as big. And I think that shows the fact that when Farage took over, the polling jumped massively, so which is why I think it is still the Farage show. If Farage goes, I think Reform dropped down to, 11, 12%?
Isn't that just because Farage is not just very charismatic, but he's also very authentic? He's never changed his position on anything.
That's true, and he carries a lot of very personal support.
Yep.
So there's the same people that voted for him at UKIP with the same people that voted for him at Reform and the Brexit Party. He carries that with him. He goes, do they stay? I'm not so sure, because he didn't stay with UKIP, and he didn't stay with what was the Brexit Party, and, you know, they're not all there with the Reform Party. So I do think there is a big question. There needs to be what I've been calling a Farage exit plan. He needs to tap his successor after the next general election, groom them now, so that when he goes in 2030, he goes, that's the next guy or girl or whoever, I'm off.
Well, because a year ago, I would have thought that was Ben Habib.
Yes, and it would have been.
What do you think of Ben Habib, Mark?
I would have joined Reform if Ben had become the leader.
Mark, what's your view on Ben Habib?
I really like Ben. Again, he's pretty authentic. He's always stuck with what he's always said. I think Nigel's very much capable of moving with the wind.
But does he though? But he hasn't. What's he changed his position on then, Mark?
It's not moving with the wind, it's disappearing from the scene. He bailed on UKIP when that got complicated, and then he ran away from
Well, no, he would argue that UKIP did its job, as in making the UK independent.
Well,
we are now out of the EU as of 8 years ago.
Arguing it was this great political movement, they were going to change the face of politics. The exact same comments you've said about reform was said about UKIP.
I would say that Nigel Farage is the least pliable of politicians of all in terms of changing position.
Yeah, he won't change position, but what he will do is he'll change opportunity to be in the centre light.
Okay. Mark?
That's the point.
Mark, you were going to say something.
Sorry, Mark.
Russell, with Farage, the way I can best sum him up, how I see him, is snake in the grass. He's offering something to people. You know, I hate using that term, snake oil.
Yeah.
But he's offering something to people that I don't truly believe he actually fully commits to.
What do you mean by... So what is he offering and what is not true about it?
Well, immigration, that's his big selling point. That's what brings a lot of people over to reform. Okay? Now, he talks about leaving the ECHR, about stopping the boats, and I think he can do that. But that's not correcting the problems. Now, in the past, he's talked quite a bit about deportation, what have you, but he's changed his stance on that all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Since getting into Parliament, all of a sudden his stance on all of this kind of stuff seems to have really softened.
But do you think that the reason...
You can't fix anything.
Do you think that the reason for that, Mark, is because he needs to professionalise reform so it doesn't look like UKIP Mark II? You remember David Cameron famously called UKIP as swivel-eyed loons. Now, if they are to get ready for government, whether it be winning an election or going into coalition with the Conservatives, I mean, clearly the candidates and the policies have to be more polished than just being a kind of hard-edged kind of anti-immigration party. And what reform definitely needs to be known for are policies over and above simply immigration. So I think can't we just accept that he might now be doing that in terms of professionalising reform to prepare it for government?
Yeah, I think he can do, because obviously they need other policies, and they do have some other policies. Obviously they need to expand a lot on that. But
well, they've got more than Kemi Badenoch, I'd argue.
Well, I would probably agree with you there. But the central thing will always come back to the same issue, because it's the same thing with every party, really. If all you're going to do is come out the ECHR, stop the boats, you're not actually fixing anything, because your finances are going to be pretty much the same, if not worse. The situation is going to be the same, if not worse, by the time you're looking at getting into power. So the real issue becomes you're still working with the same hand. You're still going to have the same broken system. You're still not going to be able to fix that system.
Yeah.
So unless you're willing to talk about deporting 2 to 3 million people, then you're not going to fix anything.
Yeah, which also, Mark, thank you for your call. Great call, actually, and great to hear your views. Great to hear something different, actually, which is a reform supporter that's not the biggest Farage fan, and that's kind of fine, I suppose. It takes all sorts, doesn't it? Quick response from you?
I think Mark is very right. I think you're right as well, Russell. Reform are still the immigration party. It is all reaction. They aren't leading on the issue, and they're jumping around from bit to bit to bit. There's no strategy. The main problem is lack of infrastructure, and I still say it now. Farage is a great benefit now, but he was dragging this party down the longer he sticks around. For me, reform he should tap his successor and off he goes.
Well, many would argue that they won't win or get anywhere near a general election win without Nigel Farage. Okay, look, let's leave that there. We're going to go to the news now. Back after this to talk about the prison crisis. There is one.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened.
I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain
agree with protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs. The people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to the Political Asylum on Talk. I'm Russell Quirk, here till 10 o'clock. Then it's Andre Walker after me. But ably assisting me until that point is my friend Peter Barnes. He and I agree on quite a lot of things, but we're definitely not agreeing on this dynamic between the Conservatives and Reform and this spat, this rock throwing over membership. Got a text, by the way, for you, Mr. Barnes. Stuart from Wigan again.
Oh, God.
Maybe he knows you because it's your town, isn't
yeah.
it? He says, as a follow-up text to the one previously, I will happily invite Peter to Labour Working Men's Club in his hometown of Wigan, and he will see for himself how Farage is far more popular than Starmer and Badenoch. The Tories will never win a seat in Wigan, and similar in northern towns generally. But Reform will win seats in these areas, as they'll win seats from both establishment parties.
I think, I don't disagree that they all take seats from both establishment parties. However, in a place like Wigan, there is still a heartbeat of the Labour Party within it. They might not like Starmer, but in places like that, you remember that they vote for party, not leader. That's a really big thing.
But
don't forget, of course,
they vote for someone that's capable.
They voted for Tony Blair and they voted for Jeremy.
But I think they do vote for an individual. I think in terms of charisma, I think they do. I mean, I'm not saying they should.
Vote, but the party vote leads in safe seats like Wigan and in many of the Red Wall. Well, the reason the Tories took the Red Wall was because of the issue of Brexit and the state of the Labour Party, and people are really confusing the willingness of voters to really shift around as much as people want them.
Let's get on to this issue of prisons. But let's just quickly read another couple of texts because there are dozens and dozens and dozens of them. This is from John in London. Russell, you're right when you say a political revolution is underway. Something has happened in the last two elections that has tipped voters over the edge to the point they are now prepared to turn their backs on the two main parties in huge numbers and vote for Reform. I believe they will win in 2029. It's exciting. And then we have Roger says, Suella Braverman said that we were being invaded by immigrants a couple of years ago. She was castigated for it and frowned upon. Turns out she was completely correct, as we've had now over 1,000 people arrive on small boats in the last 3 days. Most people listening and watching will agree with those concerns. Right, talking of concerns, UK prisons. Now, this subject has been talked about in the media and on this station many, many, many times. Prisons are overcrowded. Prisons are inadequate. Who knew? Keir Starmer, of course, and the Labour front bench, particularly actually in fairness, Yvette Cooper, took the responsibility for this. Their response when they first got elected to the problem of overcrowded prisons was just to release dozens and dozens and dozens of very dangerous criminals, domestic abusers, muggers and so on, way, way earlier than otherwise they would have been released. And of course they also released some incorrectly and by mistake. Now, that is no solution, is it? But what they've now done as a government is to bring in some help The problem is, from my point of view, the help that the Labour government have brought in to try and solve the problem of prison overcrowding and indeed sentencing issues. We've talked about that a lot over the last few months, particularly when it comes to the likes of Hugh Edwards not being dealt with sufficiently harshly from a sentencing guidelines perspective. The person that they've decided to bring in is no less than David Quirk. Now, David Quirk, that will, I'm sure, ring a bell with you. He was a Conservative minister. In fact, he was the Secretary of State for Justice back in 2019. He left when Boris Johnson took over. And what he was kind of famous for, big inverted commas, infamous for, was his then review of what we should do about the problem of prisons, was to suggest that when somebody's convicted of a semi-serious crime, so whether it be shoplifting, burglary, or a crime that would normally lead to a sentence of less than 6 months in prison, so 3 months, 4 months, 5 months in prison, so sufficiently serious to be incarcerated, his response, his idea, his suggestion was that you just simply shouldn't send them to prison. I kid you not. That was David Quirk, a so-called Conservative. His suggestion back then, 5 years ago, as a Minister for Justice was, well, let's just not send those people to prison. Let them presumably wander around with tags on, do some community service and so on. Quite appalling edict, I think, from someone that's supposed to be a right-leaning Conservative Party member. One of the central tenets of being a Conservative is to be tough on crime. Not just tough on crime for the sake of it, but actually to make sure that bad people are in prison for our protection, but also, of course, so that justice is done and justice is seen to be done. Well, anyway, he's back on the scene now, having been brought in by, presumably, Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper to do a review for the Labour government. And already he is suggesting that what we should do, again, as a kind of soft left solution, is when it comes to people in prison already, many of them, as many as possible, should be transferred into open prisons. Now, Category D open prisons, just to give you a kind of rundown of what they are in effect holiday camps. I actually happen to know someone that was in an open prison 3 or 4 years ago, and I went to visit him, and he told me some unbelievably eye-watering stories of how lax and how easy the regime within an open prison is. So, for instance, colour television, PlayStations in cells, and this next thing, I kid you not, people will say that this isn't true, but this is definitely what happens in open prisons. Ordering takeaways on a Friday and a Saturday night and having them delivered into the woods next to the open prison for the inmates to enjoy their choice of Chinese, Nando's or Indian. I kid you not. So that is what David Quirk has been brought in to suggest and recommend, and I think this is exactly the opposite of what we should be doing with our criminals. Let me also just give you an idea, by the way, so I'm going to bring Peter in, so I realise that you are still here, Peter. Let me just give you an idea of the catastrophe that is prison capacity. Yeah. So between 2010 and 2024, so the Conservative government's tenure, there were 9,058 new prison places created. But before you start applauding everybody, then plus 5,000 that were created within the existing prison system. So that's a total of 14,142 new prison places. However, 7,500 prison places were closed. 4,000 prison places, as in cells, were lost through what they call dilapidation, so cells that were not fit for habitation. So the decrease in prison places underneath that 14,142 gain is 11,651. And then there have been some other changes that net all of this down to, wait for it, the British net increase in prison places over the last 14 years has been just 482 additional prison places. So I'll say that again, only 482 net prison places have been found in the last 14 years by the previous government. That is an absolute unmitigated disgrace. Not only has crime increased, detection rates, of course, also have decreased. So I suppose you can argue that the capacity hasn't quite been as necessary as otherwise it should have been, because we should be catching more people. But the population of Britain, of course, in that time has increased by millions. And our response has been to only create 482 more prison places. So no wonder we're in this mess. No wonder the likes of David Gauke and the Labour front bench are saying that we can't put people in prison anymore and that we need to be soft and lenient because there's no room. Well, my suggestion would have been that, well, we should have built some more prison places, of course. But what about army bases? What about prison ships? What about sending prisoners abroad on a paid basis to countries that will take them, that we can pay to take them if they themselves don't have the same imbalance between prison population and prison capacity? There are answers to this, a bit like there are answers to immigration, but it seems that successive governments, not only have they sat on their hands, but their response now is just to throw those hands up in the air and to say, well, we're just going to have to treat people much, much more leniently, which, of course, does nothing as a deterrent against criminals that are intent on crime. Don't we have a right as a population in Britain to have our loved ones protected from these people? Peter.
The state of British prisons is a national and if not international disgrace. It lies at the foot of every political party and politicians. Yes, of course, the Conservatives were in power for those 14 years, but I don't remember the Labour Party running around talking about building prisons. They mentioned it in one budget and it got quickly shifted away.
Well, they said 6,000 places they were going to build,
but no, I'm completely agreeing with you, Russell.
It's mealy mouth, isn't it?
Is absolutely
it's mealy mouth because you know a politician would have said in 2010, hey, we're going to build 14,000 new prison places, and I think they did. And of course the media and the electorate respond and say, oh, that's okay then, that solves the problem. But of course it doesn't solve the problem when you look at those places that we naturally lose through wastage, through prisons closing because they're old and dilapidated.
The dilapidation issue is massive, but there is one issue that's linked to all of this, and it goes back to the 2010-2012 kind of budget cuts into probation services. The UK has the highest level of recidivism. That's people who reoffend.
Sorry, what's that word?
Recidivism. We've done this before, Russell.
Okay, we have.
We've done this before.
And I still don't know what it means.
It means basically people who leave prison and go on to return to prison within, I think it's 6 months to a year, or 18 months, if I'm not quite sure off the top of my head now, but is astronomically high compared to the rest of Europe. We do not give people the chance to get out of the prison system, so we then have to keep people in prison who should have been given the options and the tools and the training to leave their life of crime behind and go back to regular society. You can't just bang people up and then go in like 3-4 years, go, oh great, off you go. Oh, by the way, you can't do this, and society's moved on and there's no jobs for you, there's nowhere for you to live, so what is the natural thing for people to do? They go back to the life of crime. If you don't fix that cycle, you could build as many prisons as you like, you're just keeping the same people in.
But in the over-liberalisation of Britain, in my opinion, we've ended up in a situation where we seem to only care about rehabilitation. Now, I'm not suggesting that rehabilitation isn't important. Of course, it is. But the notion that you can rehabilitate 100% of prisoners, by the way, is for the birds. I completely agree. For the birds. Yeah. But what I'm more concerned about is the incarceration of people that commit crime, so that not only is it a deterrent and a punishment, but predominantly to keep those people away from other people that they might do harm to.
This is where people get the prison. Again, you could respond to that spot on, but this is where people get this argument really wrong. It isn't prisons that are categorised, it is prisoners that are categorised, and that's been going on since the 1966 Mountbatten report. This is how long this...
You've done your research.
I've been talking about this for ad nauseum, like for a very long time, because this has been an issue that's waiting to explode for quite some time. It goes back to when, I think, was it Gregory Blake, the spy, and he escaped, and the great train robbers, and they escaped, and all the rest of it. So you have Category A prisoners and category all the way through to Category D, and they're the lowest ones. There are certain criteria you have to meet to be a Category D prisoner, and they get put together. And what, in his infinite stupidity, and I cannot stand Gawk, I think he is terrible.
It's not just me then.
No, this one, we are in firm agreement. And what he's actually arguing is that we take people who are Category B prisoners and we reduce them down. We take C prisoners and we reduce them down. What he's actually arguing is that the risk to the public is somehow changed because we need the space. What is looking like here is that the UK government and David Gawk are willing to put UK safety at risk to free up prison space. That is what they are realistically doing. What Gawk has argued is not new. This is, again, it's been around since the 66, this argument. However, he's on about downgrading the prisoners' kind of risk to the public. So then you can move them around.
But can we be clear?
That's the problem.
Apart from the holiday camp environment that I've just outlined with regard to what open prisons are, and the fact that, you can have whatever you want in your cell, you can have your PlayStation, your Xbox, and, colour TV, perhaps a Netflix subscription, who knows? I don't know, have whatever you like. But also, these are prisons where you can come and go during the day.
Yeah.
Now, I get and I accept, and I'm sure someone of a liberal nature will call or text in a minute to say, yes, but it's good that those people can start to reintegrate with society and start to work. Yes, if they are a white-collar criminal or they are someone that is at the end of their 20-year sentence, but not someone, which I think is what David Gawk is suggesting, that is, 6 months into a 12-month sentence for burglary, perhaps with menaces, that then inappropriately gets sent to an open prison where they can wander around the local village doing whatever they like, because that is what you are allowed to do in open prison. Can we just please think about the public and public protection rather than the ne'er-do-wells that are themselves in prison because they're being punished for doing something wrong? Why don't we think like that anymore?
Because, unfortunately, we haven't built the prison system correctly for the last, 50-odd years now, if not longer, to actually accommodate this growing problem. So this is why, like I said, what they're now arguing is that those people who are a threat to society, that anybody looking at it on paper would agree, what the government is now arguing, well, they're not as big a threat as these people. They're reducing the risk level, so then you can put them in these open prisons. People, like you're saying, who are a threat or a higher risk, is what they actually call it, a higher risk to public safety, are being moved to less secure prisons to free up space in the more secure prisons. But that's what's happening.
But until we, and I'm preaching the obvious here, until we grab this problem by the scruff of the neck and build 10, 15,000 more prison spaces, which we clearly haven't done in almost 2 decades. I mean, it's literally 482 extra prison places in the last 14 or 15 years. We are going to be having this debate and having people like David Gawk and others see the solution as just moving the deck chairs around on the Titanic, rather than immediately trying to find a solution of capacity. And I accept that you can't build a prison overnight, but let's at least start thinking about building 10 or 15 prisons now. But in the meantime, there must be a provision. There must be a provision. I mean, frankly, if we can find space for 36,000 small boat illegal immigrants every year, then we can surely find 10,000 similar spaces in similar places, camps, whatever you want to call them, for those that have been convicted of crimes.
I point to the Nightingale Court. I point to the movement of the courts as well on the 2 tiers and the riots over the summer. The system can move when it chooses to move, and yet again we are seeing that this is a choice. The government is not doing exactly what I think is a spot-on thing to, which you've just said there, Russell, and that's the reality. It can build a prison overnight or a detention centre if it chooses to. We've shown that we could do that with the Nightingale hospitals. We put together God knows how many in a short amount of time.
Yeah.
And yet this is the reality of it.
All right, well, look, let's finish that there, although it's not finished. I'm sure that this debate will run and run and run, no thanks to the lily-livered potential approach of David Gawk and others. We're going to take a break. When we come back, another frustrating story, that Saracen's Head pub narrative. It's got worse. Back after this. I'm Russell Quirk. This is Talk.
happened to that pledge to be the fastest growing nation in the G7? Well, that's one of many promises, pledges, even just targets that seem to have been dropped, particularly after that catastrophic budget from Rachel Reeves. And it looks as though we might be heading for Rachel's recession. They all talked about Rishi's recession a year ago. Well, if you use that kind of language, it's going to come back and haunt you. So Rachel's recession, I'm afraid it will have to be labelled that.
Demonstrating its do what I say, not as I do attitude. I mean, just to boil, they are hypocrites and they are a blight on society, aren't they?
I mean, look, if I was doing Just Stop Oil's PR, which is not a job I would ever do, but if I was, I would say, do you think that maybe you should source those T-shirts from such absolutely watertight ethical places that no one could ever dream of putting you on the front page of the Express to complain?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Thanks for your company this evening. It's 23 minutes past 8. I'm Russell Quirk in for Kevin O'Sullivan here on Talk and the Political Asylum here till 10 o'clock. Pete, you've had a text.
Oh, another one.
Good evening, Russell. Is Peter single? Says Tanya from London.
Oh, Tanya. Oh.
Not your type?
Not my type, I'm afraid, darling.
There you go, Tanya. Read into that what you will.
Yes.
Thank you, but a respectful no thank you. And just another quick one. Mark in Beccles, I don't care if Reform has 1 million members. What I care about is the official opposition party holding Labour's feet to the fire instead of attacking a minority party, and so on and so on. Thank you very much indeed for your texts. We have had dozens and dozens and dozens. Keep them coming, 87222. And of course, if you want to join in and actually call and speak to myself and Mr. Peter Barnes here, 0344 499 1000. Or you can leave a voice note on WhatsApp using the same number, 0344 499 1000. Let's go to another incredibly frustrating and irritating story, one that's bound to trigger a bit of a reaction from the Talk audience, I suspect. And do you remember Khalid Bakr? A few days ago, decided that he was going to sue the owner of the Saracen's Head in Amersham, Mr. Robbie Hayes.
That's the one,
Poor innocent Robbie Hayes. The Saracen's Head in Amersham, by the way, has been the Saracen's Head in Amersham for just 500 years, so it's not new. However, Khalid Bakr, who is a convicted terrorist, he was convicted some time ago for, I think, holding, disseminating terrorist type publications. He has taken exception to the Saracen's Head sign over, first of all, Robbie Hayes' pub, and says that it's so offensive he is taking legal action. So he has launched a legal action, a civil action, in the county court, and wants compensation of over £1,800 from poor Mr. Robbie Hayes, and now says, Khalid Bakr, that he is going to donate the money when and if he wins to the children of Gaza. Now, just to be clear, Mr. Bakr is seeking £1,850 over what he calls the depiction of a brown-skinned, bearded Arab that he has taken exception to. Now, I think something else is going on here. Not quite sure what. I don't know if anybody has any ideas. Let me know. 0344 499 1000. Apart from this being one big jihadist publicity stunt, I suspect, because the plot thickens, Peter Barnes. He's now decided, Khalid Bakr, that he's going to sue further pubs of the same name. So he's now decided to launch an action against the Saracen's Head on the banks of the River Wye in Hereford, owned by Simon Belsey. And he also is launching a legal action against another one in Hertfordshire, Kings Langley, owned by Mr. Peter Dillingham, a 17th century pub, so obviously that's been around for a little while. And Mr. Dillingham has just the most brilliant response. Peter Dillingham, well done for this. He says, it's frankly ridiculous that a convicted terrorist is scared of a pub sign.
Yeah, brilliant. Love that.
What is going on here? Is it just a publicity stunt? I suspect it is.
Yes, I think this is somebody who is looking for attention and is gaining it, and actually what he's doing is showing the absolute ridiculousness and the absurdity of what is going on in this country when it comes to this kind of stuff, of renaming pubs because somebody is offended by it, renaming street signs because somebody is offended by it. I do not care if you are offended by something. It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
Not a thing.
But there are dozens, hundreds, thousands of pub signs, again, pubs that have been called what they have been called for many, many years, that, you know, some would say now, or in hindsight, would we call that pub the Black Boy, B-U-O-Y? There is one in Wivenhoe, by the way, that I have actually visited. Would we do that? No, probably not. But they are of their time. There is a context. And frankly, if people are going to run around the countryside taking offence and then suing, I would suggest that they have something wrong with them, as indeed it would seem that Mr Backer has. And I think there are other rather more pressing things to worry about. Mr Backer does have a further contextual comment as to why he is so offended, by the way. And he says that the main issue for me is not so much the image of a Saracen on a pub sign, but the actual caption associated with the signage. He goes on to say, according to my humble knowledge, questionable if you have any at all, Mr Backer, actually, but he says when the Crusaders, here we go, went to the Holy Land and fought the Muslims, a decapitated head of a soldier would be brought back as a trophy, and great pride was associated with this. So if the word head is removed from the caption, I would then have no issue with any pub in the UK. Did you think he realises that the Crusades were 2,000 years ago?
I think somebody may have told him about that.
Yeah.
I don't believe he knew that in the first place.
I don't think there's
anyone...
anyone...
again, I don't care. I don't care about the content. I don't care about any of what he's just said. If you're offended by it, I don't care. I am sick to death of indulging childish nonsense. The infantilization of our society on these kind of issues, of being offended, of wrapping everybody in cotton wool, making sure there is no risk and nobody's offended, nobody's hurt, everybody's feelings are all right, is boring, it's nauseating, and I am done with it. It needs to stop. Actually, what should happen is that this individual, if he takes it to court, should actually then be brought up on charges for wasting the court's time.
Well, to be clear, this is a civil action, so it doesn't appear that he is going through... It's not a criminal action whereby there would then be, thankfully, a legal aid question mark over this, because that would be even more ridiculous if public money were being used to further this particular... no pun intended, crusade on behalf of Mr Backer, which he now probably will be offended by if he's listening to this, which I'm sure he's not. But let's just be clear and remind ourselves that Mr Backer is a convicted terrorist on the basis that he was convicted by the Old Bailey in 2018 of being found with jihadist leaflets on the tube. He admitted, so he pled guilty to 5 counts of dissemination of terrorist publications. He's a slight hypocrite, I think, isn't he? If he's offended by something, I'm quite offended by him being a terrorist.
I'm quite offended by him even being here. Why on earth?
But he might be British.
He could be British.
I don't know where
I take that
born.
back. Of course, if he is British, then there's not a lot we could do about it. But why is a convicted terrorist? Why? That's the thing here. A terrorist running around disseminating this propaganda, a jihadist propaganda, actively undermining British society, putting people at risk, and yet we're entertaining this nonsense from him.
Well, and some people might wonder why he was ever released. I mean, I know, look, again, back to the whole prison...
really good point.
The whole prison debate just now, in terms of rehabilitation. Do we think that jihadist terrorists can be rehabilitated? Let me know if you think that can absolutely be the case. 0344 499 1000, because I'm not so sure. It's a bit like paedophiles, isn't it? Can paedophiles be rehabilitated? I don't think they can.
A man who apparently is offended because it incites violence, a convicted terrorist.
So what else might he be offended by, do you think?
I don't know. Fresh air? I don't know, the colour purple. I don't know. Just literally everything. What? In fact, I don't believe he's actually offended. Well, I think he's using our current society and the law, like many of these people do, to get that 15 minutes of fame and just milk the system. He's looking for money and he's looking for attention.
One would imagine that in his day-to-day endeavours, as he wanders around Amersham or wherever he lives, I'm not quite sure where he does live, I think there was an Essex connection, actually, which is unfortunate, given that I live there. he presumably is also offended by such things as Christmas. I presume he's also offended by churches. I mean, there are tens of thousands of churches of all sorts of denominations that are not mosques around Britain. I mean, is he going to start suing the Catholic Church and the Church of England because they were part of the... Well, certainly the Church of England was part of the Crusades. So is he offended by all churches?
I think there is a bigger story here, and that is the fact that we have got to this point where this conversation is even entertained. We have fundamentally failed for the last 20 years, if not longer, to defend British values, to defend what it means to be British, and defend what it means to live in the United Kingdom. We do not, and I can't think of a single politician realistically that has stood up for actual free speech, free association, and actually stand up for the values that make being Britain Britain. We continually bend over backwards to accommodate everybody's offence or this and that and the other. I am done with it. David Cameron in 2015 gave a speech about muscular liberalism, about, in fact, yeah, we can be an open society, but we have to start drawing lines. Yeah. And that just disappeared.
So let's just go back to your point as regards, you know, if he was an immigrant to this country and doesn't like it, you know, why is he here? Should he, whatever your words were, whether you chose them carefully or not, I don't know, should he be allowed to be here? The point is, if you are in a country that is so averse to your own views, whether you were born here or not, you do have the choice to go and live somewhere else. Yep. So, you know, I would imagine that if you are so offended by, you know, Christianity and everything that goes with the thousands of year history of England and Britain, if you are offended by that, then surely you have the option not to be here. Why doesn't he go and live in Iraq or Afghanistan or Syria or Iran?
Because in our society, he is given privilege. He is a victim, so therefore he is important, and society will bend to him. If he goes to one of these nations that you mentioned, he's one of millions.
It's really quite annoying, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's the problem. Our society is bending to the wrong people. It is not bending in favour of those of us who want common sense back on the table.
Indeed. Right, we're going to take another break now. When we come back, more of your calls and texts. This is Talk. I'm Russell Quirk. Back shortly.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Talk, home of common sense. This is the Political Asylum. I'm here sitting in for Kevin O'Sullivan and handing over to Andre Walker at 10 o'clock. But meantime, we're going to take some calls for the next few minutes. And Stephen in London has been good enough to dial 0344 499 1000. Thank you, Stephen. What did you want to say, my friend?
Hi, gentlemen. I believe that Starmer will definitely win the next election. He's kept the public workers on his side. He's kept the unions on his side. And by the next election, there's going to be, I think, 2.5 million new immigrants. He's going to give citizenship to all of them and housing to all of them, or as many as he can. And so they're all going to vote Labour as well.
Yeah, I've been saying this actually on this channel for a few weeks, that I think part of the plan is to give immigrants, including illegal immigrants, the vote after a period of time. It's something that Kamala Harris, of course, was itching to do in the United States, and that's why she let 10 million immigrants across the border in the US. So, no, I agree. I think that's exactly what's going to happen. And this also is why the public sector is being bloated. You know, there's already 2,000 more civil servants now than there were on July the 3rd. So I think you make a very reasonable and sensible point, Stephen. And do you back this? Do you support this? Or are you criticising it?
Well, I think it's be awful if Starmer got in again. Absolutely awful for the country. But I think people are being very naive about Starmer. If they think he's just going willy-nilly and just doing what he wants without thinking about how to win the next election, that's a very naive point of view. Mm-hmm. He's thinking very hard about how to win the next election. He's got his sights set on that, and he's not going to just hope, cross his fingers and shut his eyes and hope for the best.
Steve, you are absolutely bang on. People have underestimated Keir Starmer before he got into power, and yet we continue to underestimate him. He is not some kind of like pushover anymore. He's the Prime Minister. He has institutional power, and he is gunning for the next general election. He believes he's going to win. If there was a general election today, the Labour Party would be the largest political party. They would be 41 short of a majority and hold 26% of the vote, but they would still be the largest party. This is really, really important stuff. Once we talk about the kind of amnesty and the kind of making voters and jerry-rigging it all around, as things stand now, people are still going to vote for the Labour Party, and that is because what Starmer has been able to do, and you're spot on, is secure the public sector vote. Yeah. Because he said, you vote Labour, I'm going to give you a pay rise.
Well,
and that is how he's going to stay in power.
He's going to keep doing it. Stephen, thanks for your call. Very quickly, because we're going to take another break shortly, but I want to go to Laura Jane in Hampshire. Laura Jane, thanks for calling Talk.
Hi. You were mentioning a while ago that reform didn't have the infrastructure, and it is building, because where I live, there is a meeting on the 21st of January at 7 p.m. in a village not far from where I live, where they are having the first meeting for Rumsey and Southampton North.
And this is to try and shore up a kind of ground force of volunteers, is it?
Yeah, and eventually to choose our possible MP. It's the branch that's opening in our area, as it would for Conservative and Labour.
Yeah, and because obviously reform is constituted differently because it's a company rather than a party, and obviously a lot of people use that as a means of criticising reform and Nigel Farage. But do you get the sense that when it comes to candidate selection, it will be purely at the behest of local associations that decide who becomes the MP or indeed a local councillor?
Well, that seems to be on the agenda. I'll be able to tell you after the 21st of January.
Well, Laura Jane, would you ask that question specifically when you go to that meeting?
Yes, absolutely. I want to know how it's going to happen. Absolutely. Sorry, dog in the background.
Laura J, I completely agree with you. The infrastructure is growing. The problem is, will they be able to get it in place for the local elections? Because a lot is hanging on those elections. Because the reality is the Labour Party aren't defending many seats. It's actually the Conservatives that are defending most of them. So this is key moment for reform to really take it home to the Tories.
It's key. And
it's absolutely crucial.
It's a very conservative area here. I haven't been here. I moved from London last May, And it's a very Conservative area. And during the election, it was an absolute doddle for the Conservative MP to get in again. But that's, people who have joined Reform, including me, that's our intention, is to make it work. And,
do you know what? Farage himself said that there had to be a minimum of 100 seat win. In the locals for Reform to take it forward, because what this actually means, it goes back to we were talking about candy and money and the fact that donors are moving to the Reform Party, because if they don't perform at these locals and they don't perform in Wales, all these donors are not going to give half the amount of money.
Pete, hold it there. Laura Jane, thank you very much indeed for your call. We're going to go to another break. More calls and texts later, but when we come back, we're going to be talking about the King's Christmas message with Rupert Bell. I thought it was a bit lacklustre and a bit political. Let me know what you think. 0344 499 1000. Back right after this.
Happened to that pledge to be the fastest growing nation in the G7? Well, that's one of many promises, pledges, even just targets that seem to have been dropped, particularly after that catastrophic budget from Rachel Reeves. And it looks as though we might be heading for Rachel's recession. They all talked about Rishi's recession a year ago. Well, if you use that kind of language, it's going to come back and haunt you. So Rachel's recession, I'm afraid it will have to be labelled that.
Demonstrating its do what I say, not as I do attitude. I mean, just to boil, they are hypocrites and they are a blight on society, aren't they?
I mean, look, if I was doing Just Stop Oil's PR, which is not a job I would ever do, but if I was, I would say, do you think that maybe you should source those T-shirts from such absolutely watertight, ethical places that no one could ever dream of putting you on the front page of the Express to complain?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back and thanks for your company this evening. It's 8:45. I'm here till 10 o'clock, then handing over to Andre Walker, and I'm in for Kevin O'Sullivan. This is the Political Asylum. And talking of things political, let's talk about the King's speech, the King's Christmas message, which is not supposed to be political at all, is it? Well, let's talk to Rupert Bell about the speech itself. Rupert, how are you, sir?
Very good, thank you, Russell.
Good, look, thanks for joining me. And I know, look, you won't want to get political, but I couldn't help but watch it on Christmas afternoon and think, and bearing in mind, I am a royalist, I'm not a Republican. I love the royal family, I love the tradition, I love the institution. So, you know, I'm not throwing rocks for the sake of it or because I have an ideological difference to you. But I guess he had rather big shoes to fill. Insofar as his mother's performance over the kind of previous few decades. I thought it was, first of all, a bit lacklustre, but I do think it was a bit political, particularly when he talked about the criminality in the summer of the so-called rioters, and particularly when he kind of glossed over that bit where he talked a lot about, you know, how wonderful Britain is for multiculturalism. There would be a few people that would disagree with that, I think.
Well, this is where he's got to navigate his way through, because he's a deeply religious man, but he's also aware that he's a man who is, I suppose, in a way, the head of state. And we're a multi-faith state, although we are still Christian, bearing in mind the Anglican Church, of which he's head, is having its own issues right now with all the problems surrounding the Archbishop of Canterbury, the Archbishop of York. So it's a very difficult sort of position for him to navigate, and that's probably one of the reasons why he went to a non-denominational chapel in the heart of London that is not actually assigned to any. But
wasn't there a medical reason for that? Obviously, because of his fight against cancer. That's the context that I read into that this was very much about his hat tip to his cancer struggles and the people that are helping him in such.
Yes, and I think. You talk about being lacklustre. He's still undergoing cancer treatment, and so he's not 100% fit. Yet he's still doing plenty of public duties. Okay, they're now on a Christmas break, as you know, we saw them on Christmas Day in that sort of semi-formal occasion when they walked to the church, very much in the pecking order of where you stand within the royal family. But I think it is difficult, and yes, and you allude to the Southport riots, the riots after that, the horrible situation that happened. It's a very difficult one for him to navigate his way through. And I think he is acutely aware that he has to try and be as apolitical as possible. But it was such an emotive time from all sides that I don't know, he was always going to find himself probably damned if he did, damned if he didn't with this particular issue.
And Rupert, can you talk us through how the speech is put together? I mean, does he pen a first draft and then, from there on, does it go through speechwriters, then presumably has to be vetted by government and lawyers to make sure that, he remains sufficiently distant from government in terms of what he says? Talk us through the process, can you?
He basically he writes it, but obviously there will be plenty of people sort of saying maybe his natural enthusiasm to go in one direction. So there will be plenty of final drafts that will have been, or endless drafts that will have been crafted. So it's not just thrown together on the back of a cigarette packet and said, right, off you go, King, go and speak. No, it is, this is a set piece occasion. So it has to be, the tone of it is designed to reflect where he feels he is and how he feels he can help his country. So it's very much, yes, I'm sure he will have discussed it with the Prime Minister. They have a weekly meeting anyway, so I'm sure there would be opportunities for them to have a discussion about where he was thinking he was heading with his speech and how he wanted to sort of set the tone.
I'm very surprised, Rupert. I'm very surprised that, given that liaison with Keir Starmer and given King Charles's penchant for such things, I'm just surprised that it seems the net zero references seem to still be on the cutting room floor. That's a relief.
Well, yes, because I think he knows that is a political hot potato. No one would say that he's not interested in the environment. That's not going to go away. But when we all knew that when he was going to take over from the late Queen, that people were assuming he was going to be leading the sort of environmental charge, but he can't do that. So he has to try and be, at all times, it's sort of all things to all men. That's really what he has to be.
But his mother, you know, the late Queen Elizabeth II did manage to navigate that every year. She was absolutely bang on, wasn't she, in terms of walking that tightrope between, you know, being in touch, being compassionate, but also making sure that she didn't tread on anything too political. She was very good at that.
She was, but it'd be interesting to know, you know, probably those early Queen speeches that she did back in the 50s, they were very much, you know, sort of set-piece occasions. But as the monarchy has evolved, it becomes, you know, the king has always, we've known his views on issues. Look, he's been talking about environmental issues from the late 80s, early 70s, you know, for most of his life. So it's nothing new. He's always been a champion of being aware of the environment. What exactly he thinks of things like net zero, he's obviously trying, you know, he's not letting his opinions out on that particular issue.
Rupert, when he was Prince of Wales, he was known to be quite, let's say, meddlesome, actually, quite animated when it came to writing. I mean, do you remember that story some years ago? He wrote dozens and dozens of letters to prime ministers and secretaries of state. Do we think as king he has reined that in now because he's had to?
I think he had to, because if, you know, a letter falls in the wrong, you know, circles, then it will be out. You know, the environment doesn't allow him to do that. He has the opportunity to pass on his opinions and counsel to the Prime Minister. The late Queen was, you know, and all the Prime Ministers she had, that weekly, and the experience that she had, she was able to bring to bear and offer a quiet word here and a quiet word there. Look, it got a bit confusing for the late Queen in the latter years of her life, with prime ministers changing or as the wind changed and the various stages. But she was a counsellor, and actually prime ministers look forward to the opportunity for that meeting. And yes, I'm sure the king is using that to say, well, have you thought, and bringing some of the experience that he's learnt over the years. But it's so difficult for him to get the tone exactly right.
Well, I suppose he's still just starting out, Rupert, isn't he? If he were allowed to vote, I wonder who he would vote for. I suspect he's a bit of a Liberal Democrat.
I guess difficult to say where the allegiances would lie. But where I think the question actually is now becoming more relevant. How relevant is the King's speech actually as something that, as part of the Christmas tradition?
Well, I guess, look, we can answer that in two parts. I mean, I think that the speech itself as an institution is incredibly important. I think the monarch addressing the nation, which obviously, you know, generally only happens either if something horrible has happened or indeed at Christmas. I think the institution of the message is incredibly important. But I guess the question is the content that important?
Well, therein lies the debate, because actually you would say is, you and I, look, you're much younger than me, but at the same time, the people younger than you, how much, the people in the early 20s, were they clamouring to watch the King's speech?
Well, let's ask Peter Barnes. He's definitely not in his 20s.
I'm definitely not in my 20s.
He looks like he's in his mid-late 40s, but he keeps telling me he's in his 30s.
Yes.
How do you feel about it?
So it's a really interesting one, and I think Rupert makes a good point about how is it really relevant anymore? I think you're really right that the monarch addressing the nation as an institution has to continue. But what I'm getting a little sick and tired of is the content is being pulled apart by either side. He is kind of, you know,
damned if he does.
And what I think the King, I think he missed a key moment, and where he could have had a brilliant speech here, where he could have talked about the changing faces of family. He needs to start taking overarching themes and not really talking about specifics, because it's when he gets into the specifics, it all blows up in his face. If he starts talking about the things that actually bind families together and actually relates to the people, I think he can bring so many more people back into the fold and actually make this speech relevant. Him sitting there and making overtones about this happened this year and that happened this year, well, it is not going to really attract any more attention, and I don't, my generation and the younger generations don't really care about it.
Guys, let me just read a text.
It would be nice to see a broader approach.
The text is just coming from Elaine. So, Rupert, what do you think of this? King Charles has lost the people, says Elaine. He's too far gone and loves the Archbishop of Canterbury and co. too much. Also, net zero and multiculturalism. He couldn't be more out of touch, says Elaine.
Look, his multicultural, his all-faith approach is always going to create
Does
problems,
he mean faith or does he mean demographic?
But I don't think he's lost the nation. I think what it is he knows that he has in this era where, let's be honest, we are not now a very religious nation. Yes, we are Christian by tradition, but let's be honest, the churches were not, that sort of need that just everybody turned up and went to church on Christmas Day. That just doesn't happen. We are not.
Is it any wonder when the church is led by the likes of Justin Welby and Stephen Cotterill, the Archbishop of York? Individuals that preside over paedophile cover-ups left, right and centre. That doesn't inspire me to want to go and kind of kneel at a pew in church on a Sunday, frankly, Rupert.
No, and this is the problem for the traditional faiths or Christian faiths. They've got themselves by some of the actions that they've done. They've just been as culpable as many other people, and instead of taking the sort of Christian approach as you would expect, they've got themselves into people not trusting and losing faith in the church,
in the institution.
Yeah, but I completely agree. But this is a point where the king could have stepped in and saved the institution and actually elevated
he's head of the Church of
as
England.
the head of the Church of England. This is what he could have done here and said, yes, all this has happened. This is terrible.
Do you think he should have thrown Justin Welby under the bus?
Because I think he should have thrown Justin Welby under the bus, because this non-denominational stuff doesn't work, because at no point will we ever demand an imam make the same concession. He is head of the Church of England. Whether we like it or not, that's his role. And he has, I think, by this kind of eroding that, and what that really means, has led to a lot of this other stuff kind of spiralling out of control around the monarchy. And that's where we begin to question, what is the point of the monarchy when it continues to bend over backwards and to cede ground for the sake of multiculturalism?
But it's a very, very fine line. So
I don't think it is a fine line.
In terms of what Rupert's been saying and almost what Elaine's saying here, in terms of being out of touch, I'm not sure that the monarchy is specifically going to be in touch, because it is by the very nature of its institution, rather distant and aloof. But I guess there is a point that you also want your monarch to understand what matters to ordinary people, and also not to potentially antagonise lots and lots of protesters and patriots that were on the streets in the summer, those majority that were not rioters, where effectively our monarch has just kind of lambasted them all and said that they were criminals.
But I think the problem there is we've gone too far the other way, as in we've given too much credence to the people that don't like the monarchy. He is the monarch. We're a constitutional monarchy. He exists. The system exists. We can't just deny it and keep eroding it and keep saying, oh, well, we don't talk about that bit, we don't talk about that bit. All of it has to be talked about, and all of it is part of the pageantry and what makes the UK the UK.
Pete, we've got to move on. Rupert, thank you very much. Just very, very quickly, can you mark it out of 10, the King's speech, out of 10? What do you think?
I think I'm sort of agreeing.
Come on, quick. I've got a few seconds. What do you think? Out of 10?
It happened. The marks out of 10, 6.
Peter?
I'd agree. About 5.5, 6.
Yeah, I think 5 or 6 as well. So, OK, look, we'll be back after the news. I'm going to be talking to Ivor Sampson about smashing the gangs and Christmas Day, Boxing Day immigration.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened.
I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. A shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in, Oivamo slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs. The people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer did...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back. I'm Russell Quirk in for Kevin O'Sullivan. This is the Political Asylum. I'm here till 10 o'clock. Andre Walker after me. I'm still joined by Peter Barnes, and we've also got a guest in a second, Ivan Sampson, the immigration lawyer that you'll be very familiar with on this channel, I'm sure. But just while we're getting him ready, let's talk about Christmas Day, Boxing Day migration, Peter Barnes. So 451 migrants arrived on these shores on Christmas Day. And on Boxing Day, so yesterday, 407 migrants crossed the Channel. So I make that 858 in just 2 days. I mean, that's quite some Christmas present for us, isn't it?
It really, really is. And I just don't really know what further we could say on this issue. For as long as we have the pull factors here, we continue to roll out the red carpet. We put them up in 4-star hotels. We give them food, clothing, education, legal aid, and all this kind of stuff. This issue is going to continue. You can smash the gangs, you can stop the boats, but they're still going to find a way to get here.
Well, the gangs aren't being smashed, are they? Let's be honest. That was just absolute, as we knew at the time, absolute hyperbole. Well, look, let's talk to Ivan Sampson, who obviously knows about these things because he's an immigration lawyer. Ivan, glad we got your sound sorted. How are you, sir?
Mm-hmm. Very well, thank you so much.
Good, thanks for joining us as ever, friend of the channel. Big numbers over the last couple of days, 858 small boat illegal migrants, as they are. How do you feel about that, Ivan?
Well, firstly, they're not illegal.
Well, they are. They are, because they break the law by coming here illegally. It's against the law to enter this country as they do, so they are illegal.
Well, the Refugee Convention says different.
Our law says that they're illegal.
No, I have to correct you. They're not. They're called irregular.
No, you can call them irregular, but they're illegal.
We call them illegal.
I mean, they don't even have any IDs. So, letting someone that we don't know into this country it is, by its very nature, unlawful. I mean, it's an invasion. Irregular is a name that you and others have just made up, Ivan.
No, it's a refugee convention. No, they're legal as they're set off. That's correct. But the minute somebody claims asylum, they're no longer illegal at that point. That's the thing. And the minute somebody claims asylum, then this class as irregular. Now, if somebody doesn't claim asylum, you're absolutely right, they are illegal at that point.
Okay,
but look,
I guess
the issue is your friend, your commentator, he said that there was a pull factor because we put them up in hotels. That's not the reason people come.
Yes. So why do we think they're coming here, Ivan, in such numbers? I mean, we're up at over 35,000 dinghy crossings, or people on dinghies, for 2024 so far. Obviously, the year's not over yet, so that's a 21% rise on last year. What do you think the pull factor is?
Well, there's research been done on that. Data's been collected on why people come across, and the main reason is they're fleeing persecution. and they're
What, from
choosing
France?
to use.
I know the
ignoring France. They're not claiming in France. That's correct.
Why?
Why?
The reason they're coming here is because
Why are they
they've
not
got
claiming in France?
Well, they don't claim in France because only about 3% of asylum applications are approved in France. So they bypass that on the basis that they know that they are much more likely to have a negative response and come here because they are probably, what's the number, Ivan? 55 to 60% likely to have their asylum application accepted?
Correct. And of those appeals, half of those appeals will be won as well. So the majority of them are genuine refugees. That we have to accept.
But can we just define what a genuine refugee is then? Because, I think most of us think that when it comes to people that are seeking asylum, they're coming from war-torn countries. Now, the top of the list in terms of the nationalities from which those small boat migrants come, the countries are the likes of India, which is not at war, the likes of Vietnam, which is not at war. I mean, it might have been 50 years ago, but it isn't anymore. So fleeing persecution, I mean, that's a really kind of easy but quite lazy broad brush label to give everybody that comes over on a small boat that they're fleeing persecution. I mean, I would put it to you, Ivan, that there's simply economic migrants with their hands out.
Look, I agree with you. I don't think we can accept millions of people coming across. I accept that. But the data, you've got to look at the data. What the data says is we take half the number of refugees that France or Germany take.
So what?
I don't think we care.
Why is that always totted out by people? I don't care if we take half, a third, a quarter, a 16th. It doesn't. It's a completely irrelevant
We're
statistic.
a much smaller country in land mass and population than the likes of Italy, Germany, Spain and France.
Well, look, we have a moral obligation. Remember,
why?
We have a moral obligation. The British people have done for decades, have given shelter to those genuinely fleeing persecution.
But what, 30,000 people a year? I mean, but why do they then choose if it's genuine?
It takes 100,000.
But why do they choose to come over on small boats without identification? Why don't they fly into Stansted and claim asylum? Because they're paying. Because they're paying, Ivan. They're paying £5,000 to gangmasters that then use that money, goodness knows for what. Maybe for drug trafficking, arms trafficking. I mean, it's an absolute racket. They could surely get on a plane to Stansted Airport for about 80 quid and then claim asylum. Why do you think they pay gangmasters £5,000 each and throw their ID over the side? Should we not be worried about that?
Absolutely. It's unacceptable and unsustainable why successive governments have not been able to secure our borders. You can blame the asylum seekers because that's where the focus is. The focus should be on our governments. Why are they not securing our borders? Why are we not now? Yvette Cooper, before she became Home Secretary, as Shadow Home Secretary, she said we would have safe legal routes. That's the way we're going to tackle it.
But safe legal routes, I mean, we already have those. As I say, they're called, ports of Dover, as in the correct way of landing in this country, and airports. Ivan, I'd have to put it to you.
You cannot get a visa.
But Ivan, no, but you can claim asylum. As soon as you get to Stansted, you can come. Ivan, I'd have to put it to you, though, that maybe the reason that this problem hasn't been tackled is because of immigration lawyers like you.
Well, I get that all the time, and I get lots in my email making all sorts of nasty threats against me.
Well, I'm certainly not going to do that, but you are an immigration lawyer. You do presumably act on behalf of those that are coming here with a view to seeking asylum.
Well, first, make it clear, I don't take any legal aid work, right? First of all, I don't help a single person who comes across the channel. I don't do that.
There's one now. Take your phone. There you go. I bet they're on a boat in the middle of the channel. Ivan, I'm on my way.
You can make fun of it, but you know what? The law says that people are allowed to claim asylum. Now, if we don't like the Refugee Convention, let's vote for a government or a party that takes us out of it.
Well,
but don't complain about the lawyers.
We have consistently...
And don't complain about the courts.
We have consistently voted for parties that told us they were going to solve the problem of illegal and indeed an excess of legal migration. We've done that since about 2010, actually, but successively, unfortunately, those politicians say one thing, a bit like Keir Starmer has done over the last 5 or 6 months. They say one thing and do another. The electorate have been deceived. This isn't the electorate's fault. The electorate are indeed voting correctly, in my view, to mitigate immigration, but there seems to be something either at political level or legal level or civil service level that then is preventing the will of the people from being enacted.
The people preventing are the French government. Look, if the French government wanted to stop people leaving their shores, they could do that. They don't. So something's terribly wrong with our relationship with the EU. And I think my gut feeling is they want a quid pro quo. They can quite happen. The French can stop people leaving their shores. And I'll tell you, what the convention says is you've got to physically be in the country. Why? Why do you have to be physically in the country to claim asylum? Why can't you claim asylum on the French side?
Because the problem from our point of view is, as an ordinary British person concerned about the influx of people into this country, on a daily basis, that would surely open the floodgates even further, because they wouldn't even have to make the journey. So all of those people that are right now in those camps in Calais, if they could just press a button effectively on an app to claim asylum, the problem will be even bigger, particularly as we do approve, as we've just accepted, 60% or so of all asylum applications. That would be an absolute disaster, Ivan.
I disagree with you. The reason is we would have our quota. Every Western country...
Why should we take a quota? I don't understand why we should take a quota. Why can't Egypt and Syria and African countries, South Africa, for instance, countries that are next to Vietnam, for instance, Thailand, why can't they take these people?
I agree with you. They should do. Look, are you suggesting we take no refugees at all? Is that what you're suggesting?
I'm actually definitely suggesting that for now there should be a moratorium, yes. I think we should put our foot on the ball and stop, because we all know, and you really know, if you were completely honest with me, you would accept that the vast majority of these people are not genuine asylum seekers insofar as them fleeing persecution. They're economic migrants. I suspect, here's a wild stab, less than 5% of all of those that come here and claim asylum are genuinely escaping persecution.
Well, that's just bluster on your part. I mean, the data doesn't say that. People...
But we don't even know who they are, so how can we rely on the data?
Have you ever read an asylum a SEF form? Have you read one?
Why would I want to do that?
Well, you're saying they're all 5% are genuine.
No, I said I'm taking a stab. Based on my anecdotal view of the world and the fact that the top 3 countries that send people to this country are Vietnam, India and Albania, who are not at war, well, I'm more right than you are, surely.
Well, I'm asking you, have you read an asylum claim? Have you read one?
What difference would that make to me believing that this country is overrun by fake asylum seekers?
Make a judgment on a single claim. You're saying that 95% are not genuine.
I'm suggesting and presupposing that that's probably the case, yeah.
No, well, that's just bluster.
No, it's not.
Because you're pandering to people that want to hear you say that.
No, reality. There's reality. How can it be if 70% of people that come here are coming from countries that are not at war? How can the people from those countries be genuinely escaping persecution?
Well, again, you're wrong about the figures. Most
Albania,
people
India,
are not from
Vietnam.
Albania. No. They're not from Albania. I'm not sure where you're getting your
No, number 1 is Vietnam. Albania was number 1 until 2022. By far, Albania. Until we then did a deal with Albania to stop them, send them back. You know Albania was right up there, Ivan. You know it was. Don't be disingenuous. Now it's Vietnam and it's India. India have got a space programme, for goodness sake. India's a country that we send millions and millions of pounds to. Yet you're expecting me to accept that people coming from India that just want to work here on the black market are somehow escaping persecution. It's nonsense.
And you're suggesting that learned judges who look at these cases, who are familiar with the Refugee Convention and the law that surrounds it, and are familiar with the facts, they've decided that these are genuine refugees, and you, with no experience at all, haven't read a single asylum claim, but just because of your perceptions, you believe that they're not genuine.
Yeah, well, because we all know how ultra-liberal the judiciary is. We also know, and you'll know this as an immigration lawyer, the tricks that are pulled in terms of pretending that those individuals are coming from other countries other than those that they're actually coming from, but also the whole, now I'm a Christian, now I'm gay, look, I've now got a tattoo on my arm of a crucifix, I can't possibly go back. We know that happens. Surely you concede that is part of the problem.
It is part of the problem. There are disgenuine claims. I accept that. But
the majority.
The Home Office job is to weed them out.
So why is it that we accept 60% and France only accepts 2.5%, Ivan? Why that disparity? Why are we such mugs? Why are we so naive that our Home Office, our asylum processing centres, the people within it, they accept 60% of all claims unequivocally, but in France it's only 2.5%. Why is there that difference?
I think the Home Office is dysfunctional. I don't think they're properly trained.
So they are wrong then?
Oh, well, I think they're wrong many times. You know what?
Well, they must be wrong then in terms of the status of where those people come from.
I go to court and quite often there's nobody from the Home Office even turns up. So we need to look at our system and the way we process the claims. Don't blame asylum seekers. Desperate people will do desperate things. We can't control that.
What about if we were to process them on the beaches of Dover? So as they came off the boats, we take them straight into a tent, process them, and either say no and put them straight back on the boat and send them back, or put them into camps, holding camps, where they have to stay until their asylum application is approved or otherwise. And if it's not, then they're immediately deported, rather than them wandering through the streets of Dover and wherever else for as long as they want, whereby we can't then find them to deport them. Why don't we put them into holding and processing camps at Dover the second that they land on the beach?
Well, the government can do that, and the Home Office can do that.
Do you think we should?
Even better than that, I say they should be processed offshore. Not even, because once they're here on land here, it's very difficult to remove them. The process of removing asylum seekers is quite complex, especially when many of them are undocumented. So then you've got to get to trying to find out whether the country will accept them. Countries like Iraq and Iran will not accept people. So once they are physically here, you cannot remove them, even if you refuse their asylum claim. Well, so it's very complex. No, I agree with you. We need a bilateral treaty with France. I personally think...
But we've already given them £500 million.
I know.
Well, where did that go?
We don't know. And this is the thing. With no performance target. Who did that deal?
Well, that was idiotic Conservatives. And that wasn't a link, by the way.
I was just about to say that's a very interesting link.
Peter Barnes would just like to make a comment before we wrap up, Ivan, if you don't mind.
My quick question, Ivan, is you've just admitted that the Home Office is failing, that the system isn't working. So why are we continuing to use the system that potentially could put the public at risk? Surely, B and Russell are right that we should have a break and a moratorium, fix the system, then restart the programme. What you're actually arguing here is that we keep going down and using a faulty system, and then we can say, well, we need to fix it. But you don't know who you're letting in. If we look at what's happened around Europe, bad actors have used this crisis to enter countries and done horrific things. And this is why, for me, this entire issue is a national security one, not one of compassion. This is one about keeping the public safe. You're advocating for a system that is going to put the public at risk. If we continue down this path, there has to be a break. We have to get this right, because I don't want what happened in Germany to happen here.
Ivan, quick response, rebuttal from you before we go to a break.
Not at all. I agree with what you said. I think that we have people coming here. We don't know where they're from. We don't know their background. I think it is a security risk. But if you have a moratorium, how do you stop the boats coming? What do? You push them back?
Well,
the French push them back, and we push them back.
Navy, maybe. I mean, I remember when we had one
across the Channel. Is that what you're advocating?
Yes.
I don't think that's going to work.
Yeah, the Navy in the Channel and holding camps on the beaches of Dover. And by the way, also cut the incentives that are on the Home Office website that say, hey, come on down, asylum seekers, you can have education and a house and money, and if your wife's pregnant, is another £300. Free dentistry. Oh, and by the way, a private doctor will arrive every Monday to make sure that you're okay. Yeah. Something, by the way, that's not afforded to the rank and file British population. Ivan Sampson, thank you very much, as ever. Great contribution. We might not agree, but look, you can't say that he doesn't put up a reasonable argument, but mine was better. Back after this.
happened to that pledge to be the fastest growing nation in the G7? Well, that's one of many promises, pledges, even just
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Well, that was quite feisty, wasn't it? Talking about Christmas and Boxing Day immigrants. Yes, 858 illegal, because they are illegal, small boat immigrants landed over that 2-day period, and we're already 21% this year ahead of the previous year. Yes, it doesn't seem to be abating, does it? I suspect the way that this Labour government are going, we can, big inverted commas, look forward to what, 40, 45, 50,000 illegal immigrants on boats next year in 2025. No sign of those gangs being smashed, and we're 6 months into this Labour government. Do you remember when they promised to smash the gangs? I think all they've done actually is to arrest a dinghy seller on the beaches of Bodrum who may or may not have been involved in people trafficking. Anyway, let's, talking of water across the pond, a different pond, the Atlantic Ocean. Let's go over to the United States. We're going to talk to Greg Swenson now, who's chairman of Republicans overseas, because apparently news reaches us that Americans are exhausted with politics, further to, I guess, what was a rather protracted and very, very busy election campaign in the run-up to November the 5th. Greg, thanks again for joining us.
Great to see you, Russell.
Yeah, and you, and hope you had a good Christmas. Happy New Year, I think we can say that now, can't we? 3-4 days out?
Yeah, it's close enough.
So talk to us about what's happening over in the US in terms of this apathy to politics. Do you think it's because people have just experienced this huge, noisy, controversial campaign? Or do you think that for some reason Americans really are tuning out of politics on a more kind of permanent basis?
No, I don't think it's permanent, Russell. I think, you know, what happened is there's a certain amount of burnout, that's for sure. But also, you know, there's winners and losers in elections, and the Democrats... Big winners and big losers in the case of Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. Yeah, I think so. I mean, and I don't mean to say that in a way of gloating, but the Democrats have just dropped out of the media. MSNBC and CNN, the two left-leaning networks, to say left-leaning is being kind, they are almost out of business. Like the ratings have dropped in a really dramatic way. And yet, I'm not suggesting that people on the right are obsessed with watching cable news right now, but it's not a disaster. It just means, you know, I think the Democrats, and there's been a lot of press about it, have just tuned out because they lost in a very dramatic way. And Greg, sorry, do you think that's kind of apathy, or do you think that is the public's kind of criticism of Democrat-minded commentators, particularly on MSNBC, CNN, etc., that realised that those commentators were absolutely wrong in their assertions that Kamala Harris would win? Do you think that it's a credibility issue as much as an apathy issue? I don't think it's apathy. I think it's the latter. I think it's credibility. And I think what many people realized is that the press was in on the hoax, the cover-up of Biden. You know, Biden's fine. He doesn't have cognitive issues. That was a complete scam. And I think people have realized it. Now, prior to the great debate of June 27th, when Biden really, you know, had to come clean with his cognitive issues, prior to that, 65% of Americans thought that Joe Biden had problems, cognitive issues.
Well, everybody else knew apart from those around him and them failing to admit it. Can we just move on quickly, though, also now to what happens next? Because I think in Britain here, some people would be forgiven for thinking that Donald Trump has already taken office. Can you just confirm kind of that's not the case? Obviously, he's inaugurated on January the 20th?
Yeah. So it's still 3.5 weeks away.
Biden's gone on holiday in the meantime.
He is completely checked out. Biden, and by the way, who's ever heard of Vice President Kamala Harris? Like, she's completely disappeared. So
what happened to her?
She just dropped out. I mean, I can't blame her in many ways because she was humiliated in the presidential election. So
what does she do next? Do you think? Do you think she publishes children's stories or something?
At very best, she'll be the president of some university.
Or a woke think tank or something.
But she'll not be a politician. She's never going to be
and never was. Let's be completely honest. So inauguration is the 20th of January, so that'll be huge. Is that officially the day that he takes office?
Yes, officially at 12 noon on Inauguration Day on January 20th. So I will be there. Many of my friends here in the UK are coming with us. It'll be a really great moment.
Can I come?
Of course, you're done. You got to speak for this.
I could just only imagine what a historical spectacle that's going to be. And it's, I think when Donald Trump had his inauguration previously, of course, there was much criticism for him saying, it's the biggest inauguration ever, the best ever, the best you'll ever see. People say it's the most fantastic day they've ever had. I mean, I actually think this time, given the scale of his victory and so on, I suspect that it is going to be the most massive of days politically. What do you think he'll do first? So when he kind of sits down at, I presume, midday plus 1 minute on the 20th, what do you think he does first? I mean, he's going to presumably sign a whole bunch of executive orders.
Yeah, I would hope so, but definitely close the border. As Biden basically opened the border when he became president 4 years ago. So, one is close the border. Two is liberate the energy sector and stop the hostility to the private sector in general, but especially the energy sector. So I think those will be that'll be 1 and 2.
Tariffs.
No,
tariffs. TARIFFS, not Harris.
I don't think that'll be a day one issue. I think that's more of a -20 issue. He's already threatened tariffs, especially on Canada, Mexico. I think it's more of a threat thing, not a day one thing.
Well, he said he wants to own Canada and Greenland. So day one, he's presumably going to be... Didn't he tell Canadians that if they became the next state of the United States, that they would save 60% in their tax bill? I mean, he's trying to incentivise the public, it seems. And there are some politicians that have actually said that they think it would be quite a good idea to become part of the United States.
Well, if I were a Canadian, I would want to be part of America, right?
You want to be part of anywhere apart from under Justin Trudeau, wouldn't you?
Of course, yeah, because it's such a mess. It's such a disaster. But I think the Greenland thing makes sense. There's 56,000 people there. They'd probably love to be American citizens. So that would be good for them, great for the West, great for America. And then Panama, well, that's really critical, shall we say, transit. 75% of the traffic through the Panama Canal are American naval ships and commercial ships. So that's just good for America. I hope
it looks like countries are now fighting for Trump to be their for that country to be their first official state visit. There's a report just dropped in the Telegraph, actually, that Britain wants that to be them. So we're going to extend, apparently, it seems, an invitation to Donald Trump to come here very, very quickly indeed. And I guess that might also have something to do with tariffs, on the basis, of course, that we sell lots and lots of things to the United States. The last thing we want is 25% put on the price of our goods. And I guess that the government have got a bit of a tall order, a bit of an obstacle here on the basis that I'm not convinced that Keir Starmer and David Lammy are the people that we really want on the negotiating team trying to convince Donald Trump not to impose those tariffs. I would reckon that probably Nigel Farage will be the saviour in that respect, don't you?
It very well might be. And look, I think Nigel's great. I think he's doing a great job and could be really critical in this relationship. But, look, Keir and David Lammy, they have to reach out. The reality is they're...
And apologise, probably. for all the nasty things they've said about the 47th President of the United States.
Start with that, right? Absolutely start with that. And I think it's, it's critical for the UK to, or for the government, the existing government, to kiss and make up. I can't wait for Nigel to be, a prime minister or someone else besides Labour. But I mean, that's maybe my partisan view. But I do think that I'm not sure we should wait till the state visit, which won't be till 2026. That is way too long. This has to happen immediately. And I think anybody who can...
You would imagine David Lammy, unfortunately David Lammy, should be on a plane, maybe he'll even be at the inauguration, but should try and buttonhole Trump and his team immediately. The other thing that I saw that Trump was going to do is to actually enshrine in law the fact that there are two genders.
Yeah, that would be a good start. I mean, these are things that American voters, and
it's red meat, right, Greg? It's red meat, isn't it?
It also is just common sense, and I think people have just been, people are fed up on both sides of the Atlantic with this absurdity. Let's get over all that stuff. Let's just move on from and get back to common sense, so we can get back to legislation that actually works for people.
Well, and an economy that's going to go like a rocket ship, I suspect, under Trump and his friend Elon Musk. Peter Barnes just wants to ask you something, Greg, I think.
Hi, Greg. How are you doing? It's nice to see you again.
Peter.
It's nice to see you. There is a huge thing. You mentioned immigration and closing the borders as one of the first things that Trump is going to do. However, just this week, and I think if not today or the day before, you've got the Musk versus MAGA debate, and that kind of chasm is starting to open, and we're starting to see fractures within the Trump team. Now, obviously, the left-wing press here is going gangbusters over it. The Guardian is basically salivating over the prospect of this. And it's interesting how that links with your comments about MSNBC. I actually think they've disappeared because they hold the American people with such contempt for not doing as they were told. I think that's why you've not seen them. But I'm going to say, are we starting to see these fractures? How true is what we're actually seeing? Because obviously, you know what UK press is like when it comes to Trump, and I just want to we could pick your brain on that one for a moment, if that's all right.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and look, it's the party of the Big Tent. I think there's always going to be little divisions and infighting amongst the party, and I think that's healthy. I think that's great. And look, because when everybody becomes the herd party, following the herd and just listening to talking points. I spent a lot of time in the last few months, especially before the election, with my Democrat friends here in the UK, in media, at different think tanks, at very rubber chicken dinners. It was painful listening to them because all they did was read Democrat Party talking points. They couldn't speak for themselves. They were pathetic in their dishonesty, but also they were just absolutely wrong. And so I'd rather have the banter between different factions within the party. Okay, you're for banning fracking, I'm not. Let's have that argument. But the people on the left don't like those arguments. They follow they take the litmus test, they take the test, the purity test. Oh, I must be against fracking. I must be for net zero. I must be for killing unborn children in the third trimester. Like that's just part of their deal.
Yeah, and I think the big thing there. Sorry, Greg.
We've got just quickly
really quick.
Wrap up. We've got to close up.
I think the really big part of that is they don't have any arguments. They just say this stuff. They don't even understand the words that are coming out of the mouth. But when it comes to people checking out, I kind of get it. When my generation has lived through more world-changing moments than any other generation. If we could just have 10 minutes of peace, I think a lot of people would be quite happy about that.
Talking which, gentlemen, I need some peace now, so we've got to go to a break. Greg Swenson, thank you very much, as ever, Chairman of Republicans Overseas, superstar guest. Let us know what you think of everything that we've been talking about. We've got 25 minutes left. Next, we're going to be talking about the very, very sad news, actually, that Keir Starmer's brother passed away yesterday, Boxing Day. So we're going to be talking about some other well-known people that have also left us over 2024. But also get involved. Join in with anything that we've been talking about over the last 2.5 hours. 0344 499 1000, or indeed text us, as many people have done, on 87222. This is Russell Quirk. This is Talk. I'll be back after this.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
So there's still time to give us a call, 0344 499 1000. You get straight through to me here. Might even let you speak to Peter Barnes, depending whether he's behaving himself or not. Lots of texts, as I say. Let me just read you some of these. Andrew from Salisbury says, I didn't watch the King's speech, and I know it would have triggered me. Always thought Charles as a bit of a virtual signalling hypocrite. OK, fair enough. And who else have we got here? Natasha says, Elaine is right. The King is too captured by woke issues. For the first time, this traditional middle-class family simply couldn't bring themselves to listen to the King's speech, she says. And then Daniel says, I've just started watching the show regarding the migrant mess. I see that 451 arrived on Christmas Day. Oh, yeah, don't forget the 400-odd on Boxing Day as well, Daniel. I'd imagine if you're on a dinghy heading for Dover and you land safely, then every day will be classed as Christmas Day. It's outrageous, and so on.
Just on that one really quickly, I did a little bit of maths and it's worked out that is going to cost us £35 million.
On the basis of £400,000 each for the life of a migrant, yes. Look, it's... I was going to say the gift that keeps on giving as it's Christmas, but it's a gift that keeps on giving for all the wrong reasons, and I'm afraid it's bound to continue well into 2025. Do we really have any faith that Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper are going to stop the boats and smash the gangs? Come on, be realistic. That's just fantasy stuff, isn't it? OK, look, let's talk now about Sir Keir Starmer's brother, Nick Starmer, who sadly passed away yesterday at the age of 60. Of course, Keir Starmer has paid tribute to him. He says, my brother Nick was a wonderful man. He met all of the challenges in life that life threw at him with courage and good humour. We will miss him very much. I would like to thank all of those who treated and took care of Nick. Their skill and compassion is very much appreciated. I think he was suffering from cancer, bless him. Prime Minister also has two sisters, Katie included, who is actually Nick's twin. Sir Keir also said, Nick was dealt a very different set of cards to me, and he's had problems all of his life, problems I've never had to face. I admire him, not in spite of the way his life has taken another course to mine, but because of it. So tributes there, understandably, from Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer, of course, is reported to be taking a holiday. It looks like has decided, for obvious reasons now, that he won't be going on holiday with his family and will be staying here in London. So very, very sad news. A death is always very, very sad, and a time for kind of, sadness and reflection, but particularly when it happens over Christmas. That's not very nice at all, is it, Pete?
No, it's not. And sadly, these things do happen, but we have lost quite a few big names and quite a lot of influential people.
We
really
have.
This year.
Shall we, at the risk of being morbid here, but of course, look, I'm afraid, look, the media, we included, will always talk about those that we've lost in a given year, and obviously that we're only 4 days away from the end of 2024, and it's not to be morose, it's simply to kind of celebrate the fact that they were here in the first place. Let's go through some of these. So one that's, I mean, they're all notable, but one that was particularly notable, of course, was Dame Maggie Smith. And of course a very, very loved and well-respected actress of Downton Abbey fame and so on. And even at, I forget exactly how old she was. I think she was 92.
92, 93.
Yeah, something like that. Let me just double check, because I did write these down before coming on air. So yeah, Dame Maggie Smith was 89, and actually born in Essex. So she's a fellow Essex girl, as I am an Essex boy. Always had fantastic humour, even at her ripe old age. I thought in Downton Abbey she was absolutely fantastic, in particular. Sven-Göran Eriksson, of course.
I was actually on air when that was announced.
Oh,
I was here. I was literally sat in this chair.
As it happened?
As it happened, yeah.
So he, of course, was the first foreign England manager that we ever had. Died at the age of 76. Very, very sad indeed. O.J. Simpson. Now, there's a controversial character. So O.J. Simpson, of course, starts off being famous as an NFL player back in the 80s, I guess.
Yes, he was.
Was also a bit part actor. I think he was in Airplane.
Yeah.
And then, of course...
He was actually tipped to play the Terminator before Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Was he?
Yes, he was.
I think Arnold probably ended up doing that rather better than he would have done. But, of course, probably the subject of... arguably the world's most famous trial.
Yep. Also, it was the first televised car chase.
It was, yes. So when he was first accused, he jumped into his, whatever it was, truck,
Bronco.
station wagon or whatever, and went
Bronco?
off, ran away through LA. But, of course, after a very, very protracted and very public trial, and those watching on YouTube will see some of the images of this now. Famously, do you remember when he tried the glove on and it wouldn't fit?
If the glove don't fit, you can't convict.
Yes. So was acquitted
he was.
Of the double murder of his wife and her friend, are we saying? I think so. But then actually later on did go to prison because he didn't break into a museum, but he says to get something back that he owned that had been taken from him, but still ended up doing a number of years in prison as a consequence.
And why do I have a feeling that he went back for something like gun charges or something like that, if I remember correctly? Something like that. But when it comes to people who have passed away, the one I feel obligated as a Northerner and as a rugby league fan is I have to mention Rob Burrows, who died of motor neurone disease. He was a very prominent rugby league player who played for Leeds Rhinos. He raised over nearly £7 million on his own for the awareness and research into cures for motor neuron disease, and the work that Kevin Sinfield, who was his best friend and again one of the best players
his work
the
was
game's
very, very well publicised.
He's raised £15 million that he ran over 320 miles.
Wow.
That was an incredible moment.
With motor neuron disease?
No, Kevin did.
Oh, Kevin did, sorry.
And when Rob passed away, it was a big moment for the sport of rugby league and for many towns across the north of England, and I feel very obligated to mention that one.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And look, these are in no particular order. They're certainly not in order of importance. The voice of Darth Vader.
James Earl Jones.
James Earl Jones.
Somebody, Mufasa.
Mufasa, yes, the Lion in Lion King, of course. So, yes, I mean, what an iconic voice. What an iconic voice.
He was also the guy that went, "This is CNN."
Yes. And wasn't the guy that was in Darth Vader, wasn't he the Green Cross Code man?
Yes, he was from... he had a West Country accent, and that is why James L. Jones ended up getting the jokes, because nobody wanted a farmer version.
I don't think that would have played quite
I'm your
well.
father there. So that kind of accent. I'm not going to try and do accents. But that is why James L. Jones got that gig. And if I remember rightly, he was one of the first actors to sign over his vocal rights to Disney so he could continue to be the voice of Darth Vader.
Yeah, let's talk about some others as well. Liam Payne, of course, very, very tragic. What was Liam? Only 31 years old, and obviously that was in October, I think. Alex Salmond, who, of course, was a great, great friend of Talk, very good friend of Mike Graham. Actually, Mike, I think, went up to Scotland for the memorial. That was very sad.
Titan of politics.
Yes, very, very sadly. And also, talking of titans of politics, John Prescott.
John Prescott.
So, say what you like about him and his politics. What a proper bloke.
Yes.
What a proper bloke.
Jags.
Hutch. Starsky and Hutch.
David
Soul.
David Soul, yeah.
David Soul. And if you're a football type person, Franz Beckenbauer, arguably one of the best and stroke most famous footballers that the planet has ever seen. And actually, I think the only person to both also play in a World Cup final, but also and win and manage a World Cup final team.
That's a good book.
Donald Sutherland, fantastic actor.
Morgan Spurlock, who did the Super Size Me documentary, he died this year as well. Complications.
And then also I think Annie Nightingale, who was the first female DJ ever on Radio 1. And of course, talking of DJs, Steve Wright. Steve Wright in the afternoon, another iconic broadcaster. Yeah, and our own, I have to say, our own Howard Hughes, of course, who sadly passed away a month or two ago. So, a long list that isn't exhaustive. Obviously, there are others, but they are that's a selection of the people that we have lost in 2024. Very, very sad indeed. OK, we'll be coming back after this and with more calls. See you in a sec.
happened to that pledge to be the fastest growing nation in the G7? Well, that's one of many promises, pledges, even just targets that seem to have been dropped, particularly after that catastrophic budget from Rachel Reeves. And it looks as though we might be heading for Rachel's recession. They all talked about Rishi's recession a year ago. Well, if you use that kind of language, it's going to come back and haunt you. So Rachel's recession, I'm afraid it will have to be labelled that.
Demonstrating its do what I say, not as I do attitude. I mean, just to boil, they are hypocrites and they are a blight on society, aren't they?
I mean, look, if I was doing Just Stop Oil's PR, which is not a job I would ever do, but if I was, I would say, do you think that maybe you should source those T-shirts from such absolutely watertight, ethical places that no one could ever dream of putting you on the front page of the Express to complain about this? That's the...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back and thanks for joining me over the last almost 3 hours. We're on the home straight now. It's 9:51. I'll be handing over to Andre Walker in about 6 or 7 minutes' time. And so hopefully time to get a call in. And I think, yes, Robert from Nottingham has called. Robert, thanks very much for calling Talk.
Good evening, Russell.
Good evening. How are you doing?
I'm all right. How are you?
Merry Christmas, Happy New Year in anticipation of a couple of days' time.
Yes, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, well, I say it with meaning. I'm not just paying lip service to it. I mean it. And hopefully you had a good one.
It's been most enjoyable.
Has Talk kept you company for the last few days?
Say again?
Has Talk TV, Talk Radio, kept you company for the last couple of days?
Yes, it's good. My main go-to TV, or
good
radio channel.
Your staple. Well, I appreciate your call. What did you want to say, Robert?
Well, I was just going to make a comment to reference Nigel Farage and reform. I think we're going to see Nigel take a page out of Trump's copybook in the sense that, anything like what's happened with Badenoch and so on, if necessary, Trump's sort of attitude, if he's attacked by anybody, is to attack back.
Yeah.
And if necessary, legally as well.
Yeah. Well, with legal action, you mean?
Yes, that's right. I think Nigel will be very aware of the fact that...
So you mean gloves off? Is that what you're saying, Robbie? Is a gloves-off approach?
Well, yes, I do think that, because I think he'll be aware of the fact that various establishment figures will be trying to smear reform. When you start becoming successful, your opponents are going to start using quite dirty tactics, perhaps.
And what was the old Gandhi thing? Do you remember? It was first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win.
A very good summary, isn't it? And I think, Nigel and Trump are mates, aren't they? And
yes.
I think
and collaborating. I mean, hence the trips over there, and actually not just Nigel Farage to see his mate Trump. Of course, he went over there not just election time, but obviously when there was one of those the many assassination attempts, it seems, on Trump's life. But also he's been over there with Nick Candy, the new treasurer, to meet Elon Musk. Now, I mean, that is a very, very exciting development, I think, in terms of money trickling into reform, as we were saying at the beginning of the show, Robert, really, which I think will bring about an absolute sea change in British politics, a political revolution.
I think it will. I mean, I have to confess I'm a great fan of Nigel Farage, but I think Peter made some good points. He is Marmite, isn't he? Mm-hmm. You either love him or you hate him, sort of thing. Yeah. But I hope he's astute enough to use the people in his team, like Rupert Lowe and all the others. Rupert
Lowe has been exceptional, hasn't he?
He's been absolutely tops, I think.
Yeah, I think the only sad element is that Ben Habib has obviously been... he would say, I guess, cast aside. I think Ben Habib is sensible, articulate, and actually quite loved by those on the centre-right. I hope that there is a way back somehow for Ben Habib.
I totally agree. He's hugely skillful. And, you know, they've got to really try and get him back on board if they can.
Yes. Yeah. So, and when you talk about the fact that Farage is going to take a leaf out of the Trump playbook, you say that in a positive way, and you think that will work, do you, in terms of Nigel's, potential success as a consequence of that approach?
I think it's necessary for them to do that. If it's necessary, as it were. You know, I think that. I think Badenoch scored an own goal. You know, if you're going to make those sort of statements, you've got to be 110% sure that you're correct.
Do you think she's been badly advised, Robert?
Without a doubt.
But how does that slip through? I mean, it's such a fundamental thing not to do, particularly in your first, 60 days into being Conservative Party leader.
Yeah.
I mean, to make such a kind of a schoolgirl error, should we say, in terms of kind of saying something that is antagonistic but actually turns out probably to not be true. I mean, it's very amateur. I mean, it's almost out the Labour Party, out the front bench playbook, isn't it? And in terms of all the missteps that they've
and
made.
Also, if you're in charge, you take responsibility. You know, it's all very well being badly advised, but if you're the leader, you should be sort of saying, well, hang on a minute, does this are we absolutely sure about this?
Yeah, indeed.
Otherwise, I mean, I think they've got egg on their face, the Conservatives.
Yes.
You know,
well, they need to get that egg off their face pretty quickly, I think, and they shouldn't have egg on their face in, as I say, the first few weeks of a leadership launch, should they? But anyway, Robert, look, thank you very much indeed for your call. That's Robert in Nottingham there. And guess who's in the studio? Because I think he's up next with Andre. It's Ash.
Yeah, man. How you doing, man?
Very well.
Good Christmas and everything.
Really good. Thank you. I mean, it's not quite over yet, is it? We now got this.
Is it not? Well,
we've got no man's land, haven't we?
What happens? Is it still the 12 days of Christmas, or does that finish, or what happens?
I don't know.
It's still Hanukkah, though. You can light your Hanukkah candles for.
Yeah. These are the days that you wander around full of cheese and you have no idea what day it is.
Yeah, you don't do it. It's not.
I was going to say looking forward to the days off, but we're always here.
Yeah.
So not much in the way of days off. You got a show coming up?
Yeah, we're carrying on with the Badenoch thing. I mean, yeah, she was. We were sort of impressed at first. We thought, is she the new Thatcher? But she's not, is she? She's all bluster and no
not
trousers.
Margaret Thatcher. She might be a different Thatcher, but she's not Margaret Thatcher.
She's her son that got lost in the desert. What was his name? Mark Thatcher, yeah.
Mark, yes.
We got Tom Harris on, Director of Data at the Free Speech Union, and Phil Dave, broadcaster and bon vivant.
Good friend.
And wears good hats and smokes electric cigars. Prison crisis. Should convicts be moved to open prison? Maybe four-star hotels?
Yeah, open prisons are four-star hotels.
Yeah, they're better.
I had a
if you
mate
can get in an open prison for a night in London,
I was
it's
saying
actually
I had
cheaper.
a mate of mine that was in one, and he said it's fantastic. He did the last 12 months of his sentence.
Facilities.
And he said I had a PlayStation and a TV, but they were getting takeaways delivered to the woods on a Friday and Saturday night.
Yeah, they're
on the
those
basis
Lenny Henry hotels, aren't they?
Yeah.
They're
and they could just wander out and go and do what they wanted. And of course, what David Gauke, who is the ex-Conservative Secretary of State, who's been brought in by Starmer to advise. I mean, what a mistake. And it will prove to be a mistake. He is already saying, we should put all of our dangerous criminals, as many as we can, into open prisons. I mean, this stuff can't get any worse, can it?
Everything's a mistake. Is there anything he hasn't done that wasn't a mistake? I can't think of anything. Everything's he's doing, making the wrong decision, isn't he?
I was going to ask you about something. Did you see this story? You know, this idiot, Khalid Bakr, the convicted terrorist.
Yeah, suing the Saracens.
Well, he's suing 3 of them now. But guess what he said he's going to do with the money? If he wins the £1,850, the princely sum of £1,850, he's going to